Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started. So please take a seat. I want to welcome all of you here, elected representatives, elected senators, members of the public. Thank you for coming to this important public hearing. I want to start with a Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'd all stand, we'll have Representative Cole lead us off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for joining the Ways and Means Committee meeting today, as we'll be talking about an amendment to CACR 12 and which would ban an income tax in New Hampshire. And speaking about taxes, I hope you've all filed your taxes by now or filed for an extension. But the good news is you still have till midnight, so not a problem. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the Ways and Means Committee, or any committee for that matter, we typically meet in a small committee room, but we're meeting here in Representatives Hall because we expect a lot of people to want to voice their opinion on this amendment. And, you know, it occurred to me as I was driving up here today, I was thinking about, you know, the hearing and running it and so forth, and I thought to myself, virtually every governor's candidate that has won election to the governor's office has made the no income tax, no sales tax pledge. So it's going to be interesting to hear testimony on where people fall on this issue. So a couple of just rules that the Sergeant at Arms has asked me to mention is that there's no food or drink allowed in this chamber except water, so you can still drink water. And there's no booing or hissing. There's going to be things that either side is not going to like to hear. I ask you to refrain from saying anything, be respectful, and just listen to those speakers. Depending on how many people we end up having speak and how late it's getting, we do have egg timers up here that we may start instituting. But other than that, we will get going. So with that, I'm going to ask Representative Representative Ullery to introduce the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce to the committee amendment number 2026-1134H, amendment to CACR, which is replacing the bill with the following language. Roughly, the House of Representatives shall not adopt a tax on wages, earned income, personal income, or other income of individuals. This prohibition shall not apply to any tax measured in whole or in part by personal income, regardless of its designation. Nothing in this article shall prohibit taxation of businesses, corporations, or other non-individual entities, or is otherwise permitted under the Constitution. The amendment is proposed for presentation on the November 2026 ballot. And I will not take any questions, but would defer to the author. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll ask Representative Osborne to come up and speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, for introducing this amendment. It's my pleasure to be here to support this amendment, which would provide a permanent constitutional ban on an income tax in New Hampshire by placing this on the ballot this November. We are affectionately referring to this as the New Hampshire Advantage Amendment. Now, this is exactly the same as an amendment that we voted on 5 weeks ago in the House, which did not pass, as you might remember. The vote was 194 to 158. There's only a small number of members who crossed the aisle to vote for this amendment, and we heard their concerns. There was concerns about process and about not having a hearing. And I think it's worth revisiting this question together, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling this amendment that you didn't have to do, but it's a real testament to how we can work together across the aisle to address our concerns together. So not only is today tax day, but Monday was John Stark Day. And General Stark has famously noted that death is not the worst of evils. An income tax is. While we might typically think of taxes as the revenue that's used to fuel the operation of government services, it's also a system of incentives that drives the behavior of every citizen. You get less of what you tax, you get more of what you subsidize. When we disincentivize productive behavior, work, earning, our civilization becomes poorer and people suffer. For years, we've seen people move here from our neighboring states, Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine. They come here for many reasons, our communities, our quality of life. You may have noticed that our state appears at #1 on pretty much every list of everything that makes us awesome, not just in New England, but across this country. And this is driven primarily by our tax structure and is one of the main reasons that people move here. This New Hampshire Advantage Amendment seeks to codify this tradition. It's about giving voters the opportunity to decide whether this principle should be permanently protected in our Constitution. It would say to every worker, every small business owner, every family that their paycheck belongs to them. And when they keep more of what they earn, they invest in their communities, they start businesses, they create jobs. And our economic success is tied to this approach. And it also requires us as a legislature to make thoughtful decisions about how we do use that revenue that we generate through our tax system. Now, history from other states gives us reason to proceed very, very carefully. In Connecticut, for example, as I spoke about a few weeks ago, an income tax was introduced in 1991, described as a modest and targeted tax. And decades later, it has, of course, expanded significantly on side increases in every other tax as well. In Pennsylvania, a similar promise of stability through taxation has resulted in more burdensome taxes, fees, and fines, plaguing generations of their taxpayers. Now, these examples and others from many other states give us a window into what our future could become should we decide to adopt an income tax in New Hampshire. And you can listen to the architects of the plan being cooked up today. The most prominent one referred to as the 3-3 plan. 3% of your wages, $3 per thousand on your property. It's $2 billion every year out of the pockets of New Hampshire families. The largest tax increase in the history of the state, described openly as a social justice wealth redistribution model. Now, when pressed on whether this rate would remain 3% after 10, 20 years, of course, there's not an answer because we all know what the answer is because we have the history from these other states of what has happened there. Now, the New Hampshire Advantage Amendment, if we adopt that, if the voters adopt it, would provide that certainty. It would be zero. Zero now, zero in the future. It ensures that any future discussion about an income tax would only be allowed to happen with the overwhelming support of the voters. Now, real families continue to choose New Hampshire because they believe in what this state represents. They invest in their futures here. Whether Republican or Democrat, we all represent these same constituents, and we all share a responsibility to protect what makes this state strong. So the question before us is not just a policy question, it is a question of trust. Do we trust the people of New Hampshire to decide this issue for themselves by placing the question on the ballot? And Mr. Chairman, I would ask that this committee recommend CACR 12 with this amendment, and let's put the New Hampshire Advantage on the November ballot and allow the voters to weigh in directly. Thank you.
Will you take questions?
I'll tell you what, I'll hang out till the end and let everyone else speak, and if you still have questions for me, I'll be happy to answer, if that's okay.
Okay. Okay, next up I have Senate President Sharon Carson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to the honorable members of the House Ways and Means Committee. My testimony is very short and to the point. No income tax, not now, not ever. Thank you very much.
While I know many of you love to hear that, we need to listen quietly because there's going to be other things that possibly said that you may or may not like, so please refrain from that. Thank you. Okay, next I have Representative Ross Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my name is Representative Ross Berry. I represent the towns of Goffstown and Ware. I'm sorry for my casual appearance, but I'm going back to work after this, which is how I make my income. And one of the reasons me and my wife started our businesses here in New Hampshire, where we employ 18, 19 people, is because it's an income tax-free state. We get to keep what we earn. There is in Concord, whether people want to admit it or not, a drive to end that. And while members of the other party can say that they're against an income tax all they want, they're probably going to vote this down. And actions speak louder than words. So if you want New Hampshire to keep thriving, if you want people to keep moving here and starting their businesses, and yes, they are happening, you need to keep this in place. You need to put that security in place. And I'm telling you, when this vote comes to the floor, it's going to be a time where the excuses are going to be gone. You've got your hearing. It's happening. You had plenty of notice. You had weeks of notice. So what's going to be the excuse then? You guys need to pass this. I'm happy to take questions, but you guys need to pass this.
Okay, do we have any questions from the members? Representative Schamberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative, for taking this question. After 500-plus bills put forth by the majority this year, what specific problem in New Hampshire's current fiscal governance has arisen that requires a constitutional limitation on legislative taxing authority rather than relying on our existing statutory controls or our normal electoral process we all go through every 2 years to correct policy outcomes?
Oh yeah, I'm happy to answer that. It's a matter of trust. I do not trust that legislatures in the future will not try to implement an income tax. And in fact, you have members on your committee that have endorsed an income tax. So it is a matter of trust. The people do not trust that in the future, you guys will not try to take their paycheck. So that's why this is a priority. That's why we're here today. And you need to do the right thing. You need to take this off the table. If I was in your guys' shoes, I would be voting for this overwhelmingly just so it doesn't come up every 2 years. That's actually the smart thing to do. But we will see.
Follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
Do you believe future problems deserve future solutions, not fixed rules?
An income tax will never be the solution in New Hampshire. And maybe that's where we disagree.
Okay. Any other members have questions? Representative Almy.
Thank you. This is not a bill just about an income tax. This is a bill about a tax on wages, earned income, personal income, or other income of individuals. The state has obligations which cost money to the people. And what this does is to say that what it says in the following sentence, which is nothing in this article shall prohibit the taxation of businesses, corporations, or other non-individual entities. I don't know what non-individual entities are, but I do know that what this is talking about is shifting the burden entirely to the businesses. Thank you.
I'm not sure what the question was, but what the bill does is ban the, what the bill does
you
is...
see it that way also.
No, I do not. I do not see it that way because what the bill does is it stops the burden from shifting onto individuals. That's why it's an individual income tax ban.
Follow up?
Follow up.
Yes, if there is no increase in the tax on the businesses, and there is no tax on anything related to any human being individually, then isn't it true that we're going to have to shift the entire burden down to the towns?
No, Representative, it's not true, because every year that we have cut taxes, the tax revenue has increased. Because as you get the government out of the way, as you let people keep more of the money that they earn, they do good things with it. They start businesses, they invest in their community. You don't need the heavy hand of government to come in here and push your will down. Let the people keep their money. Every time we cut the taxes, the revenues go up. And it's happened for the last, 15 years. This isn't a new concept. You guys in Ways and Means should know that.
Representative Spar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Berry, I think you said you have a family business, correct?
Yes.
Do you have any policies, or do the bylaws of your business prohibit your company from receiving cash or revenue from any sources, like, for example, from the federal or state government, or from a bank for a line of credit or a loan?
We run our business like anyone else would run their small business. I don't know what the point of the question is.
So you haven't
I
placed,
don't know how it relates to an income tax, but go ahead.
So you haven't placed any limitations on your business as far as revenue sources, correct?
Well, I work in childcare, so my revenue sources are working families, so the people I talk to all day. So I don't get big old hunks of money. It'd be nice if I did, but it's not how it works.
Follow up, sir?
Follow up?
So you haven't limited that flexibility of your business to access existing or future revenue sources if necessary. So do you feel it is fiscally responsible to undermine the same flexibility by handicapping future governors or legislatures with this amendment, which is what it would do?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we should totally handicap and remove their ability to levy an income tax. I 100% believe that.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Okay, next up I have Senator Darrell Abbas. Welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Dan, State Senator for District 22. I'm here to support the CACR. Very concerning about the questions. Not now, not ever. It's an easy question to answer. There was a poll done back in March, and only 22% of Granite Staters actually support an income tax. The overwhelming majority of Granite Staters don't support it. Certainly enough for this to pass if you put it on the ballot in November. Granite Staters don't want this. They're not asking for it. The only people that do support it, the people I've talked to, that want an income tax have a misconception that their property taxes will be lowered. But we all saw the plan, or read the plan that was rolled out back in March. Not only did that create an income tax, it actually would increase your property taxes to go along with it. So please support this, let the people decide it. So again, we don't want future legislators or future governors to have to address this. Again, like I said, not now, not ever. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, will you take questions?
Yes.
Okay, Representative Ullery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Have you looked...
Excuse me, I called Representative Ullery.
Sorry.
Thank you. It's kind of difficult when people are behind. Senator, one question I have of you. This is the CACR. Do you believe the people have the right to vote on the laws that are going to govern their life now and in the future?
I do, especially when it comes to their earned income.
Thank you, sir.
That's why they move here.
Now, Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again, Senator. Have you actually looked at the tax calculator that was part of that 3-3 presentation?
I have, yes. And I looked at it, and property taxes will go up, just like they went up in every other state that created an income tax under the promise that your property taxes will go down.
It's interesting to hear you say that because when I looked at it for my home, my property taxes would drop by $2,500 a year. So I'm not sure how you found a difference. But I'd also like to ask you, when people have been asked if they support an income tax, have they been only asked in vacuum, or have they been asked in terms of if you had to choose between an income tax and an increase in your property taxes, which you would prefer?
I can't speak on every single survey that has ever gone out on this subject. The one that I read that came out in March, it was a very narrow question and didn't go into much depth. When I reference people I've talked to and ask them, why would you ever support an income tax, they have a misconception that their property taxes will be lowered.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. Next, I have Senator Birdsell.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Regina Birdsell, State Senator for District 19, encompassing the towns of Derry, Hampstead, and Windham. And I fully support CACR 12. With the changes that the legislature has made over the past few years, we've made a much better business environment. And the results are starting to show because we're seeing more and more businesses moving into New Hampshire, which is keeping the New Hampshire advantage for us. This is allowing families to have financial freedoms, and these companies are moving up from Massachusetts in a very high tax state. So we do not need an income tax. We need more businesses. No income tax, not now, not ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Would you take questions, Senator? Okay, thank you. Next, I have Senator Gray.
Good afternoon. My name is James Gray. I'm Senator. I live in Rochester. And I think that several of the speakers have spoken so eloquently that no income tax now, no income tax ever is the proper response.
Thank you. Looks like, will you take a question?
Sure.
Okay. Representative Schamberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for this question. Does the CACR 12 shift power from elected majorities to procedural rules, and is that a healthy balance in a constitutional democracy?
The CACR lets the people speak.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. Next, I have Senator Ruth Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Short and sweet, I'm Ruth Ward, Senate District 8, and I oppose income tax now, forever, and like my friend Dick, hell no. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Senator Pearl.
Good afternoon and welcome to members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am Senator Howard Pearl, representing District 17. We've worked long and hard to get New Hampshire to be an income tax-free state, and I want us to stay there. So I'm going to echo the sentiments of many of our speakers before me and say no income tax now, no income tax ever. Thank you.
Would you take a question? Okay, thank you. Okay, now we've got Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Senator Victoria Sullivan. I represent District 18, which is Manchester, wards 5 through 9 in the town of Litchfield. I support CACR 12. In 1913, an income tax was supposed to be a 1% tax federally, only on the wealthy. Now in 2026, we're seeing that the income tax on every household in America ranges from 10% to 37% of the income that people work hard to earn for their households. The government is stealing up to 37% of the income of the families that we represent. There's never been a time in history where we increased taxes and reduced the burden. We've seen it over and over again. We spend up to the money that we take in. So I will say once again, no income tax for New Hampshire. Not now, not ever. Thank you.
Will you take a question? Okay. Next I have Representative Gannon. I'm sorry, Senator Gannon. I just looked it up.
I had fun when I was here. No, I had fun when I was here. Okay, doesn't matter. Good to see you. Thank you. I am Senator Bill Gannon. I am from District 23. A part of my district is Senator Ford's beautiful Chester that I drive through every day. Thank you. It's always good to see you. My district is called the Wine District, so if anyone has spare time, come and join us. The coast is like 6 wineries. It's a wonderful day, and they can bus you around. My kids are all at a certain age. I have one young one left, but the others are all coming back to New Hampshire. And what they notice in their paycheck is that in New Jersey, or I have one who's still in Pennsylvania till he finishes his doctorate, he's coming back. I have two daughters who have just got home. They are all noticing in their paycheck about the same amount of base pay, but the take-home pay is way higher. We don't have that tax. You're attracting a much more talented, educated workforce. That's what we're desperate for in New Hampshire. We want to bring them all home. This will help do that. No tax now, not ever. Thank you very much.
All right. Would you take a question? No. Okay. Thank you. Senator Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Happy to be in front of Ways and Means again. As you know, I was the prime sponsor of this bill when I introduced it to the Ways and Means the first time. CACR 12 started as a simple principle. If politicians in Concord ever wanted to reach deeper into your wallet with an income or sales tax, they should have to prove it with overwhelming support. But let's be honest, Granite Staters have already made up their minds. They don't want broad-based taxes, period. That's why I support the amendment before us to permanently ban an income tax in the state of New Hampshire. It takes the question off the table once and for all, and it sends a clear message. New Hampshire is and always will be a no income tax state, and we will always protect taxpayers and the New Hampshire advantage. Our voters know how to make tough decisions. After all, they elected all of us. I trust our voters. I'm asking you to trust our voters, and let's pass the CACR and send this question to those voters. Thank you very much.
Will you take any questions?
Sure. Being prime sponsor, I kind of feel obligated.
All right. Representative Schamberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for taking this question. If revenue limitations imposed by this amendment prevent the state from adequately funding essential services, where does the amendment place responsibility, and why is that preferable to legislative discretion?
Thank you very much, Representative. So again, 424 elected officials, I trust their creativity. If they get one thing taken off the table, they'll find another way to do something. So I don't think it takes anything off the table. They're still able to find, if that shortfall happens, they can do it. But I also believe there are two types of legislators: those that never saw a spending problem that raising taxes couldn't fix, right? And those that fix taxes to cut taxes to meet spending, or cut spending to meet the current taxes.
Representative Opal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator, thank you for taking my question. I might disagree with your characterization of the two representatives. My real concern is the fact that a study that I hope you're aware of suggests that the lowest 20% of wage earners in the state pay 3 times more of their family income than the top 1% of this state. People making over $700,000 a year are paying less of their income, less of their money in taxes than the lowest 20%. That's true, frankly, of most of the people below the median income level, that they are paying a higher percentage. And I'm just wondering if you're aware of those statistics.
So while I haven't read the study that you're speaking of, I'll take your word for that statement, but I'll remind everybody again, in the state of New Hampshire, when you look at the entire tax burden put on by the state and put on by towns, New Hampshire is still the third lowest taxing state in the country. Adding this burden is not going to help us.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Follow up?
The study I'm referring to was a study done by a national organization that looked at every state. It found that New Hampshire is among the top third in terms of the regressivity of our taxes. Are you aware of that?
I'm not. Like I said, I haven't read your study that you were speaking of.
Representative Spar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lang, in 2011, Standard & Poor's stated that one of the points in favor of assigning a state a higher credit rating is whether the state has the autonomy to raise taxes and other revenues. S&P and Moody's Investor Services, who assigned New Hampshire its bond ratings, have cited that a state's ability to raise revenue when necessary is a major criterion in assigning favorable ratings. In fact, in 2010 and 2011, S&P and Moody's both downgraded Arizona and Nevada's ratings because of just this, causing an interest payment increase of their general obligation bonds. New Hampshire currently has excellent ratings from these companies, as you know. So I guess my question to you, Mr. Lang, is have you or any of the sponsors of this amendment consulted with Moody's and S&P about the potential repercussions to the state of a possible downgrade to our credit ratings, which could harm taxpayers who would have to potentially pay higher borrowing costs?
So thank you for the question. I don't accept the premise of the question. First off, it's Senator Lang. But that being said, the premise is if you talk to the treasurer, one of the things that keep our bond rating so high is that we don't have any one tax that is everything, right? And because we have a diversity of taxation already in the state, that's what keeps our bond ratings higher. So taking this off the table will not have an effect on that because we already have a diversity of our tax structure in the state of New Hampshire.
Any other questions? Representative Hacken-Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Lang, for taking my question. I know you're a technician and that you pay very close attention to language in bills. And so my question is about some of the language here in the CACR. I'm in particular interested in that it seems the CACR is seeking to amend Article 18 of the New Hampshire Constitution. And my understanding is historically when proposals have been made to implement an income tax ban for the state, that those amendments have sought to alter different parts of our amendment. But in this case, Article 18 relates only to actions in the House of Representatives. And I'm just wondering why we would ban the House from adopting an income tax, but not the Senate?
So thank you for the question. So I referred that question, I think, Representative Osborne, who is the sponsor of the amendment, is probably best served to answer that question. Well, that's a true statement. We also have the provision that says all revenues start in the House, all revenue bills.
May I have a
Follow-up?
follow-up? That is true. However, it requires any budgets to process or any legislation to pass must also go through the Senate, if I'm understanding the Constitution correctly. And so, of course, if you just ban the income tax in one chamber, I'm just wondering what the efficacy of not extending that ban to the other chamber would be.
So again, I'd referred back to the prime sponsor of the amendment.
Thank you.
Representative Ullery.
Nice to see you again, Jordan.
Oh, nice to see you again, Senator. I'll ask you the same question I asked earlier. Do you believe that a CACR is the method by which the people get to make the laws that rule them, that they agree to, that they set up a social contract with, now and going into the future?
We govern by consent, so the answer is absolutely yes.
Thank you. Any further questions by committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. Next, I have Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Just over 254 years ago, the Kingsmen came and stole the 12-inch pines from some of our residents. Then they came back for the 24-inch pines. We learned then that taxation is theft. It was then, and it is now. Mr. Chairman, no income tax now, not ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Rochford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, David Rochford, Senate District 1. It was good to see you again. You might notice me walking a little lighter today. That's because this morning I paid my federal income tax. And I'm here to say I support CACR 12. I think a lot of us, when a camera has been put in our face over the last several weeks, we're saying no income tax. Now it's time for us to put our money where our mouth is, support CACR 12, no income tax, not now, not ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Executive Counselor Leah Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Karen Leo Hill, and I serve as Executive Counselor for District 2. Before being elected to the Executive Council, I served as a City Councilor for 20 years. And what I know from firsthand experience is that property taxes in New Hampshire are too high. Everyone in this room knows that. But we should also be honest about why. Our crushingly high property taxes in New Hampshire are not the result of overspending by select boards, city councilors, or school boards. New Hampshire's high property taxes are the direct result of decisions made here in Concord. Over the past several decades, the state has cut revenues and reduced its commitments, ending revenue sharing, underfunding special education, and walking away from its obligation to fund 35% of public employee retirement costs. And while some legislators like to take credit for the COVID-era dollars from the Biden administration that allowed the state to pass along federal dollars to school districts and municipalities, those funds are a drop in the bucket compared to the ways that the state has shortchanged property taxpayers over the past several decades. By my estimate, roughly $3 billion in costs have been shifted from the state onto local communities in just the last 15 years alone. That is the reality driving our high property taxes. And I do want to say this. I served as a city councilor for 20 years. Local officials are not the cause of this problem. They are the ones managing the consequences of it. So when we hear claims that high property taxes are simply the result of overspending at the local level, that does not reflect the reality on the ground. Now, instead of addressing the root cause, CACR 12 and this amendment take us in the wrong direction. It does not lower property taxes. It does not restore state support. It does not provide property tax relief. What this does is lock in the very system that created this problem by tying the hands of future legislatures and making it harder to respond. New Hampshire already has strong checks and balances, and we have voters who are engaged and hold us accountable. We don't fix a problem by making it harder to solve. This amendment doesn't lower a single property tax bill. If we are serious about property tax relief, we need to stop shifting blame and start fixing the problem. I urge you to reject CACR 12 and this amendment. Thank you.
Will you take questions?
Sure.
Okay. Representative Ullery.
Thank you, Councilor. Greatly appreciate you taking the question. I have two questions, the first of which is the one I've asked senators previously. Do you believe that the CACR allows the people the chance to make their own laws under which they will live now and in the future?
I believe that the voters, the people of New Hampshire, elect the legislature to make the laws for our state.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So you're saying that the people don't have the right to make their own law when they establish the Constitution? Is that correct?
Well, I believe that the Supreme Court has declared that New Hampshire is not a referendum state. What I can tell you about this particular CACR is that it does nothing to address the needs of our current taxpayers in New Hampshire, and it does not move anything forward.
Interesting. Thank you. Will you take another question?
Sure.
The role of the towns under Dillon Rule State are to implement the laws of the state. And the state sets up the guidelines, and then the towns can apply them to their own locality. If a state law says you must maintain X, then it becomes and we're giving you X number of dollars to do this, but the town wants to do more than that, and then applies a property tax burden on the taxpayers in their own town to do more than the minimum, or more than is what is required. How does the state or a state income tax have anything to do with the town spending more money than they're required to?
Well, thank you for the question. What I can tell you as a local official for 20 years is that there are any numbers of ways in which the state has eliminated its support for cities and towns. In the 1940s, when the state retirement system was established, the state induced cities and towns and school districts to join the state retirement system with a promise that the state would contribute 35% of the cost of retirement for those public employees. In 2010, that contribution went from, it was not 35%, it had already been decreased, but it went to 0. And in just the last 15 years alone, the state has shortchanged property taxpayers by $2 billion with regard to retirement costs alone. That doesn't even address the fact that we put a moratorium, the state of New Hampshire put a moratorium on revenue sharing from business profits taxes that has amounted to $600 million shortchanged to the property taxpayers over the last 15 years, not to mention that the state has never contributed the 40% that it promised to cities and towns from the rooms and meals rentals, is shortchanging in just the last 15 years $400 million to property taxpayers. So local decisions can determine whether a city or a town believes they need to have 12 firefighters or 10 firefighters, but it doesn't mean that, but a city or a town still has to have firefighters, and it still has to have police officers. So when the state gives less, when the state removes the contributions for retirement and for revenue sharing that it has promised, it means that property taxpayers have to pick up the bill.
Thank you. Commissioner, I tend to agree with you that the towns determine what your property tax is, not the state.
Representative Opal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councilor, for taking my questions, and I actually have two to follow up. Would you agree with me that in 1963, when New Hampshire became the first state to adopt a statewide lottery, a commitment was made to the people of New Hampshire that lottery revenues would go to fund public education, and yet now we have video lottery, and that money is being diverted to the general fund. Would you agree with that?
Yes, there are many diversions happening now from funds that were intended to support public schools. School vouchers are another example. Particularly removing the income cap for school vouchers has now meant tens of millions of dollars, and in the next 10 years is expected to cost property taxpayers another $1 billion. This doesn't even mention many of the large liabilities facing our state. This morning, the Executive Council talked about the men's prison, which is in distressing conditions. We had a tour this morning where we learned that there are rats in the kitchen, that there have been maggots falling from the ceiling in the kitchen. There are tarps collecting water in places where inmates live and where our workers have to work. That is projected to be about $1 billion problem. We are also facing justice for 1,500 survivors of decades of abuse at the YDC Center, which is also going to ultimately cost the taxpayers a lot of money. When it comes down to it, property taxpayers are the backstop in New Hampshire, and the decisions here in Concord have contributed and caused the very high property taxes that we all pay.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Follow up.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Councilor. The last thing, I'm wondering if you would agree with me. I have often heard members of this body speak with great pride about the fact that New Hampshire's support for public education is actually in the top 5 of states in the country. What does not get relayed in that statement, in that pride, is the fact that 70% of that money is coming from property taxpayers, and the state of New Hampshire actually contributes the least of any state. Would you agree with me on that?
Thank you for your question, Representative. About 2/3 of our property tax bills in New Hampshire support public schools, with less than 10% of that coming from the state. New Hampshire is dead last in the nation in terms of state support for public education, and yet we are not dead last in terms of how much we spend per pupil. New Hampshire is among, I've heard, the top 10, maybe it is in fact the top 5, in terms of how much we support in per pupil spending. And that is a testament to the property taxpayers of New Hampshire, who make a tremendous sacrifice and pay some of the highest property taxes in the entire country. We are in fact second in the nation in terms of per capita property taxes in New Hampshire, and that is the burden that we put on property taxpayers in New Hampshire when we are last in the nation in terms of state support, and yet we are among the highest in terms of support for our public school students. That is paid by local property taxpayers.
Representative Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. Just so I'm clear, do you or do you not support an income tax?
That is not what I am here about today. Today, I am here to talk about this amendment, which does absolutely nothing to lower property taxes for the people of New Hampshire. And the people in my district are sick and tired of paying some of the highest property taxes in the country, and they have elected all of us to do our job and to provide them some property tax relief.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. Is it not true that income taxpayers are also the same source of revenue as property tax payers? I mean, it's basically you're taking money out of one pocket or the other pocket, but it's the same people who are working, who are paying the property taxes. And so would it not be a better strategy to try and find alternatives to, to individuals in our state, residents in our state, as a revenue source? Why not businesses, as Senator Birdsall had suggested?
Well, if we were designing a tax structure from scratch for the state of New Hampshire, I'm sure we would all have different ideas about how we would fund it, and I suspect it would probably not look exactly the way it looks today, because I think we have heard unanimously across our state that people feel that they are overly burdened by property taxes, and that's regardless of whether you own a property or whether you pay rent on a property that someone else owns. People in New Hampshire pay an extremely high cost of living. Our housing prices, the median price of housing in New Hampshire of a single-family home is now over $500,000. It is too much. We do need to provide tax relief to people, especially people who have the least ability to pay, and I don't think that we should be tying our hands now. This is a discussion that is worth having and is not something that we're going to it's not something that we're going to solve with political stunts or gimmicks.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. The property taxes are very high, but I disagree with you that we are not at the point where we don't have an opportunity to redesign the state taxes. I mean, that's our job. Our job as legislators are to, be creative, think outside the box and problem solve to give relief to our constituents. And so I'm going to circle back to the question, are not the people that you're suggesting we tax their income the same people that are currently paying the property tax? How does taxing their income give them property tax relief if it's simply coming out of a different pocket and potentially at a much higher rate?
Well, this hearing that we're having today is a hearing about whether we should tie the hands of future legislatures or whether we should trust the voters who send us here to do our jobs. I am here to say that we should trust the voters and that we should do our jobs, and we should find meaningful ways to reduce property taxes in the state of New Hampshire. This amendment does nothing to lower property taxes in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, next I have Commissioner David Lovelern. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly or not, Commissioner.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and honorable committee members. My name is David Loveland Jr. I live in Pembroke, New Hampshire. I am a small business owner, and I am a county commissioner. I'm here today to express that I am in favor of this amendment. I support this amendment because low taxation and financial liberty is part of the bedrock that ensures New Hampshire is freer than any other state in the Union. Enshrining this amendment in the New Hampshire Constitution guarantees it will stay that way not only for us, but for our posterity. My family has lived in New Hampshire since the early 1700s and has stayed ever since, and we've stayed for the simple reason of freedom, including financial freedom. My grandfather, J. McDuffie, who served many New Hampshire governors over multiple decades, once said that every law the government passes is a restriction of individual liberty. The government taking the fruits of a working man's labor via a state income tax surely would be one of the largest restrictions of liberty the state could impose. As Granite Staters, we are a free people, and this constitutional amendment will protect that freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Elberger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wow. Would you also say that the ability to live in your house when you have retired and paid your house off is something that we should be honoring?
100%. If you own property, just like anything, you have a right to that property. It sounds like your question is kind of going into the current property taxes. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Definitely, and there's a solution to that, and we would have to look at the property tax evaluations and why they're so high. Being a real estate professional, I can tell you they're so high because there's a shortage of housing significantly. There's high demand, which drives up those prices. Thus, the valuations are higher. If we want to stabilize those tax rates, we have to look at the market, build more inventory, sell that inventory, and stabilize the property tax evaluations. And that's how we would do that.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Follow up?
I agree with you on that. In the meantime, because that's not going to happen today or next week or next year, that's a multi-year process to try to address. What do I tell my constituents who are telling me that they have paid off their houses and they have to move because they can't afford their property taxes?
It's definitely a horrible question to have to, receive. What do we do? And as a real estate broker, I've worked with clients in the same situation. And the reality is, Representative, none of us have a magic wand to solve that issue now. As you know, being a legislator, things take time. And although we have a great democratic system, that democratic system works slowly. So what I would tell them is call your elected officials, write your elected officials, go to the town meetings, go to planning board meetings, zoning board meetings, because if you want to see the change in the world, you've got to be that change. And it's just one step at a time in a long journey.
Any other questions?
No,
Representative Almy? Okay, Representative Almy.
Oh, thank you. You're a businessman. This bill gives carte blanche for increased taxation to pay for the necessities of government to the business, on the businesses, corporations, or other non-individual entities in order to exempt from any taxation of any kind to individuals.
Could you please repeat the question, Representative? I don't quite understand what you're asking.
The question was whether you understand that 18B ends with nothing in this article shall prohibit the taxation of businesses, corporations, or other non-individual entities as otherwise permitted under this Constitution. We would have three possibilities. One of them would be that we would kill this. Another one would be that it would pass and the businesses and corporations would have to take on the entire cost of government, such as it would be. And the third is that we would decide, okay, we don't need a government. So have you considered that? Did you look at this article?
So respectfully, Representative, there's a lot there, and I'm trying to kind of see wherein all that the question actually is. But what I believe is if you take money out of someone's pocket, whether it's through a business tax, a paint tax, an income tax, that's not right. And whether it's state government, county government, local government, we're all having fiscal strains, if you will, and so are our constituents right at home. So sometimes, Representative, it's not about, okay, how much more money can we take from the people we represent, but it's how can we look at our budgets right now, working with the state, the county, municipalities, finding where there's room to cut certain costs, make certain systems more efficient, implement modern technology, because you have good systems, you will reduce cost. So I hope that answers your question.
Not entirely, because this has been tried for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Commissioner, you put on here that you have written testimony. Did you hand that in to the clerk?
I didn't. I just read it, so I can hand it in to the clerk, but it's already on the record, so whatever works.
Or you can, or if you would email it to the committee.
Okay.
That'd be great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next, I have Representative Dumont, Dylan Dumont. You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I rise in strong support of CACR 12. New Hampshire has long stood as a beacon of liberty with no income tax or broad-based taxes that burden our families and businesses. CACR 12 is essential to keep it that way. History proves that income taxes fuel wasteful government spending, bloated bureaucracy, and higher costs for everyone. We will never support an income tax here in New Hampshire, and our problems will not be solved by increasing taxes or spending. We need to figure out how to decrease and manage that spending, no different than anyone's personal budget at home. And I heard prior some statements about our Constitution. One member mentioned democracy. I just want to put out for the record that we are a constitutional republic, and that's why the CR 12 is needed, and I respectfully urge the committee to support that.
Thank you. Any questions for the representative? Representative Ullery.
Sure.
Thank you for taking my question, Representative. You're a selectman, I believe, in the town of Hudson currently.
That is
I believe
correct.
you're also the chair there, are you not?
That is correct.
And follow up? In the operation of the town of Hudson, which is a modestly, about 27,000 people,
Yep.
what effect would an income tax have on how the town funds its own operations?
In my experience with government, when you raise a tax or increase spending, it's very likely that that other, whether it be municipality, county, school board, decreases their spending. I don't think it would change or decrease any property taxes. I think people will just find a way to spend more money.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, thank you. Representative Janine Nodder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the committee. Janine Nodder, Town of Merrimack. That's what I represent. I rise strongly in support of this amendment to CACR 12. Taxing every single penny we earn will not make life more affordable. To repeat the words of our late speaker, Dick Hinch, also from the town of Merrimack, hell no. By placing this ban in our Constitution, we protect liberty for future generations. Let's pass this amendment, get CACR 12 onto the ballot, and trust the voters of the Granite State to decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Representative Luno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Dave Luno, representing the people of Hopkinton and Bow, and ranking on education. I'm here to speak in opposition to the proposed amendment. The problem is not about whether we need a new tax or need to ban a tax. In fact, for the past decade, elected Republicans have blamed school boards, select boards, and city councils for sky-high property taxes. But instead of helping cities and towns and fair funding our public schools, you gave nearly $2 billion, and that's billion with a capital B, to companies like Apple, Amazon, and Walmart. And guess what? Property taxes went up by that same amount. Across the state, we've got crumbling roads, red-listed bridges, and school buildings that haven't been touched in a century. Stunts like this and kneecapping public schools won't fix these problems. It's time for people to know who their elected officials truly represent and to make sure that they vote in November. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, next we have Representative Joe Sweeney. And following Representative, I'm going to start telling you who's on deck. On deck is Representative Smith.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Representative Joe Sweeney. I represent Rockingham 25, which is the town of Salem. I'm grateful to be here today. I think we've heard a lot of great testimony on both sides of this issue today. I am urging you to vote in support of the amendment to CACR 12. I think it's important that we give voters the opportunity to voice their opinion directly on the ballot, whether or not they want to see New Hampshire having an income tax at any point in the future. I think that's important. Voters are what derive the ultimate authority of how this state is governed. The state constitution is our guiding document, not to restrain the people, but to restrain what the government can and cannot do. That is why we have a constitution, and that is why when we do want to make sure that we lock a policy in for the long term, a constitutional amendment like the one presented via this amendment to CACR 12 is the proper vehicle to make sure that future legislators are bound to not have an income tax, not now, not ever. We did hear testimony from a previous speaker alleging previous legislators had broken their promises to the people of New Hampshire. And if we are to believe that the legislative body elected by the people is so prone and so predisposed to break the promises that they've made to the people, I've heard promises from legislative leaders on both sides that we would never support an income tax. I've heard promises made from party nominees for governor from both sides for the last 20 years that we would never support an income tax in the state of New Hampshire. Those are promises that we continue to make. Leadership on both sides of the aisle. We had invited the leaders of the other party to come and testify today. I guess they had a scheduling conflict. They couldn't make it out today to speak in support or opposition to this amendment. But we have heard those promises on the House floor when it's come in. We've heard those promises in the press when an income tax was actually proposed just weeks ago. We heard those promises in the press that they would not support an income tax today or ever in the future. So let's make that firm promise to the people of New Hampshire to ban an income tax now and forever by voting yes on this CACR 12 so that the voters, our bosses, the people that sent us here, can vote up or down this November on whether or not that promise should be upheld and enshrined in our Constitution forever. Happy to take any questions you guys may have.
That's good. It looks like there's a couple questions.
Great.
And I'm getting really good at figuring out who it is based on the back of their head now. When I'm usually in the committee room, I see the front face. So Representative Elberger, you turned around so I could see you easily.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned that you believe voters should have the right to make decisions on taxing. Do you believe voters should have the right to make decisions about other issues that we face in the legislature, or is it just taxes?
Well, thank you very much for the great question. Anytime that we in the legislature decide we need a constitutional amendment for a long-term policy change to the state, we pass a CACR and we put that onto the ballot. We've had a CACR on the ballot for most of the last few election cycles. Some of them get passed through. I'm thinking fondly of the 2018 right to privacy that we put in. That had nothing to do with taxation, but we in the legislative branch decided we need to have a right to privacy enshrined in our state constitution. We put that on the ballot and voters passed that amendment. So it's not just on taxation, but the constitutional amendment process that we have in this state puts the question directly to the voters whether or not they want to amend the state constitution. That's the appropriate vehicle to do such a thing. We can't, as legislators, pass a single law or pass any rule that a future legislature can't just suspend or pass another law that says notwithstanding. Putting in a constitutional amendment really does put a bind on future legislative bodies, and that's the goal. We want to make sure that everybody that says we don't want an income tax, we're never going to propose an income tax, we don't support the income taxes that people are proposing, we want to make sure that that is ground in New Hampshire constitutional law, that income taxes are not acceptable or not allowed in New Hampshire.
Representative, follow-up?
So, for example, we passed a bill this year about limiting increased taxation for municipalities. Should that go to the voters?
I think if the bill that you're referring to is HB 1300,
I never remember the numbers.
so there's a bill that we voted on that's in the other body right now that would place a question on the November ballot to limit the growth of property tax spending as it relates to school spending locally. That is a legislative vehicle that we have put on the ballot, similar to other local tax caps that people can vote on in the March election. We voted as a body. It was a split vote. It wasn't an overwhelming majority by any means, but it was a majority, voted to pass that bill to give voters the opportunity in November, every November, to put a local tax cap on their local spending. So we did do that earlier. It's in the state Senate right now, but that's just another example of a bill that we have passed.
Follow-up.
One last follow-up.
One last one. So every piece of legislation that we pass, or don't, but let's say that we pass here between us and the Senate, that somebody has a concern about, that could potentially be put into the form of a CACR. So somebody doesn't like X, Y, or Z, somebody, I'm trying to come up with silly things and
Sure.
I can't right now. It would seem to me that that would really slow down the wheels of government if after even let's say 5 or 10% of bills that get passed then go up to a constitutional amendment level, and at some point, our citizens elect us to represent them. I'm confused as to why we don't trust that part, but somehow trusting them about a constitutional amendment is somehow different.
I'm gonna try to answer that the best way I can on the multiple points that were raised. First off, slowing down government sounds like a great idea, and we should do it as often as we can. I want government moving as slow as possible so that our people can succeed throughout the state. We have the system for constitutional amendments where if they reach the threshold in the House and in the Senate to pass on to the voters, it's a higher threshold than a simple majority. We pass those constitutional amendment questions onto the ballot, and then it takes a supermajority of the voters to actually put that into the Constitution. So if there are policies in this chamber that are, it could be mundane policy, we could change a letter, we could change a paragraph. If that constitutional amendment gets through this body, meets the threshold, gets through the other body and meets the threshold, and then the voters adopt it with the threshold that they need, that probably belongs in the Constitution because that's the people's will. On a lot of things, a lot of legislation doesn't have to go to the voters. And I would agree with you on that point. That's why they elect us. They also elect us every 2 years. So if a body ever passes a ton of bills that the people don't want, that party changes. There's been party changes in this legislature frequently for the last 20 years. Some come in, some go out, everything changes. The people's voice is always protected. At the end of the day, the people in the state are the ones with the real power. We're just their servants, and we're just doing their will. I have a feeling from my constituents and from what I've heard is people in New Hampshire want to ban an income tax, and they want to see this in the Constitution. We should not deprive the voters of their opportunity to ban an income tax this November. We should pass this unanimously in bipartisan colors because we keep hearing on a bipartisan level from leadership that we're all opposed to an income tax. So we should put our money where our mouth is, and we should ban it now, and we should ban it forever. Thank you for the question.
Representative Schamberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for taking this question. Is it consistent with democratic self-government to let one generation lock in fiscal rules, not principles, fiscal rules, into the Constitution for all future generations?
It absolutely is. There's numerous provisions already in our state constitution governing what types of taxation we can have, what levels of how we can do it, how it has to all be widespread, so you can never have the progressive dream of a tiered income tax. We already govern in the Constitution, to get back to my original point, is the document that restrains the government from taking abuse of the people. This is, to say it's one generation, we have a pretty wide amount of generations that serve in the House of Representatives and the state Senate and our government. And then it would take more than one generation to vote this in on the November ballot. So to say it's just one generation binding the future, it's the people of New Hampshire putting the handcuffs on their government to say we're not going to have an income tax. Again, not now and not ever.
Representative Opal, followed by...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Representative Sweeney, for taking my question.
Thank you.
Knowing your background, and you and I have some similar backgrounds in terms of electoral politics, given what you do, I'm assuming you understand the impact of money in campaigns. And while there's been a lot of talk about allowing the voters of New Hampshire, do you honestly believe that there would not be a substantial amount of money coming from very well-resourced people who would naturally oppose an income tax and would use those donations to persuade?
I am sure to reference parts of our New Hampshire Constitution and our federal Constitution that individuals who would like to indulge in their free speech rights and their rights to association and their right to engage in political activity, I am sure on both sides of the issue, you will see organizations that organize and mobilize their voter bases around this issue, just as they do for every candidate that's on the ballot. It looks like at this point, I know the Republicans are going to have a candidate that's opposed to an income tax for governor. The Democrat candidate right now claims to oppose it, but I haven't really seen that in writing or the pledge be signed. But it's likely that both candidates are going to run on opposing an income tax. The voters certainly will get to decide which candidate they trust more to actually oppose an income tax if it were ever to come across their desk. But certainly any constitutional amendment that we pass, any candidacy or races that are on the ballot for people to vote on between one side or the other, or potentially three sides if there's a new third party that I heard about that's being formed, certainly individuals have the rights and the freedom to support those efforts, to organize, to associate, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's the beauty of our democratic republic in New Hampshire, that we allow the voters to have such a wide range of involvement in our electoral politics. And anyone that wants to support either side of it has the full right to do so.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Follow up?
So what you're saying is you think it's okay that rather than the principle of one person, one vote, it's okay that free speech now gets interpreted as $1, one vote. And if I have more dollars, I speak louder than you do?
Well, a billionaire can vote once and a poor person can vote once. They still have the same number of votes. Now, what they can do with their time and their energy in order to mobilize and influence others, that's up to them. But everybody has one vote. Everybody has the right to exercise that vote just as much as they have the right to exercise their free speech. This isn't a constitutional amendment about free speech, but there's no reason to limit individuals' right to free speech just because we might not like the outcome of what that speech might be.
Okay, I'm not sure if it's Representative Hacken-Phillips or Representative Tierney. Okay, Representative Tierney. You guys are sharing a microphone, so I wasn't sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question, Representative. Isn't it true that just as this CACR can ban an income tax, that a subsequent one in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, could put it back in and say, we want an income tax?
Absolutely. That's a phenomenal question. This is putting it in so that if a future government wants to take that step to have an income tax, they would just have to go through the process to undo it and make sure that the people of New Hampshire are behind it and want that income tax. So at the end of the day, great question. We're just empowering the voters to have their voice be heard.
Thank you.
Representative Hacken-Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Sweeney, for taking my question. I'm just following up on my inquiry about placing this amendment under Article 18, which pertains only to the House of Representatives. I'm wondering what the efficacy of only having the ban apply to the House of Representatives adopting this ban and not also the Senate. And then I'm wondering, I guess I'll get to the follow-up after that. Thank you.
Sure. Constitutionally, in our state, all tax bills have to originate in the House of Representatives. So if there's a Senate bill that wants to impose an income tax, it's automatically not constitutional because it has to originate in the House of Representatives. So by putting it in the Constitution that the House of Representatives cannot adopt or pursue or propose a tax on income, earned wages, and what have you, that's a full and total ban in the constitutional law of the state of New Hampshire.
May I have a follow-up, please, Mr. Chair? Thank you for the explanation. I'm just wondering then, knowing the history of other constitutional amendments proposed as far back as 1992, did not limit their adoption to singularly to the House of Representatives. So I'm wondering, as a follow-up, why would we need the Senate then to vote as well?
Why would we need the Senate to vote as well?
Well, if you're not banning the Senate from also adopting, what is the efficacy of only?
Sure, and I appreciate the question and the history going back to 1992, that there have been other amendments proposed to ban an income tax in the state of New Hampshire. Despite overwhelming public opinion opposed to an income tax, there always seems to be an organized effort from one of the parties to tell people to, hey, vote down that amendment. So this is a different tack. This is a different written amendment. Maybe this does the trick and gets everybody on board. If you have an amendment to this that would still ban an income tax, I am sure the committee would be well endowed to entertain it and support it. I'd love to see the language. If there was language from you and from your caucus that puts an income tax ban on the ballot for people to vote on, and we can all get together and sing Kumbaya and do it, I'd love to see that amendment. I do know constitutionally the way the amendment is drafted does ban an income tax in the state of New Hampshire. So that is good for me to go on and support it. But again, if your caucus wants to see slightly different language that still puts the question on the ballot, that would still ban income taxes in the state of New Hampshire, speaking for myself, not any of my other colleagues, I would love to see it, and I'd love to work with you all on getting that amendment to the people.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
This is great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right. Next up is Representative Horrigan, followed by Representative Smith.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan from Stratford County District 10, which is the town of Durham, which, by the way, has some of the highest property taxes in the state and hence some of the highest property taxes in the nation. And I know my constituents are they love living here, but they don't like having such high property taxes. But I've heard few, if any of them, express much alarm about the very faint prospect of a state income tax ever being passed soon, because it's, while we're talking, and obviously this is not municipal county government, it's not election law, so this is a little bit out of your bailiwick, but if we're talking about the House of Representatives, one thing that I've thought for a long time is we need to fix the law about special elections for vacant state rep seats, because right now towns can refuse to do it, which is partially because of the expense of it, but I think if we want an amendment that guarantees the voters the right to replace their state reps when they leave office and perhaps to pay for the state, that would be, I think that would be a very positive thing, but that's kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about. That's not what you came here today, but, okay, yes, today is tax day, the day we have to send in I actually got my 1040 filled in, but a lot of us are just filling in our estimated tax forms, and that's fine. Tax Freedom Day is tomorrow, which is April 16th. That's the day when you're nationwide, when the tax burden, when you finish paying all your accumulated state, federal, and local taxes, and you're working for, and you're not, no, and you've paid off all your tax obligations. Nationwide, it's April 16th. In New Hampshire, it's April 17th, only a day later, and actually in that state to the south that we all love to make fun of, it's only April 23rd because they have higher taxes, but people earn more money down there. And actually talk about net outflow, yes, people are moving here from that other state, but actually in the case of Maine, there's actually a net out migration to Maine, which is a very similar state to ours and has a state income tax, but does actually have lower property taxes. So I think while you consider this bill, you should probably look into see if the allegations about how property taxes don't go down when you have a state income tax, you should probably check to see if that's actually true. And of course, just where I'm coming from, I don't necessarily think that all government spending is bad. You know, government does a lot of things that aren't worth doing, but private sector organizations do too. And in any case, we pay a lot of money in taxes. Certainly the property taxes are too high, but the government is also like a very good customer for businesses and employs a lot of people. So that was a bunch of stuff that weren't in my prepared remarks because I assumed you'd keep me down to 2 minutes, and I'll try not to go too far over that. So classical economics tells us that labor is a source of all wealth, and many other schools of economics have arisen since Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, a year that year special to us Americans for another reason, but the value of labor is central to, I think, to all those schools of economics. And I think it's fair to say, and I think other speakers have already said this, all personal income, and hence all wealth, is produced directly or indirectly by labor. And when you look at the issue of taxation, I think others have said this too, you've seen that all taxes are directly or indirectly paid by individuals out of their personal income. Now, it comes in a lot of different sources, but fundamentally, it's all individuals. It's all coming out of individuals' pockets one way or another. The first section of this amendment prohibiting all taxes on wages, earned income, personal income, or other income of individuals. Oh, it sounds good at first glance, but it makes no sense because the economy fundamentally is made up entirely of personal income in various forms. So if we literally banned all taxation of personal income, we would end up with no taxation at all and hence no state government at all, which, and I guess probably some people in the room like that idea, but obviously that's not practical. We need to have at least some state government. And the rest of the amendment then adds 2 exceptions, which makes it possible for us to actually have a state government, but they're basically just playing games with words, especially the whole thing about only taxing non-individual entities. All individual entities are made up, all individual entities have people running them, unless you have maybe, of course, unless of course maybe you have AI agents running an organization, but essentially all non-individual entities are just made up of groups of individuals. So there's many ways to tax personal income. Actually, the simplest way, not necessarily the only way, not necessarily the best way, but the only way is to directly tax individual earnings. And of course, that's not the only way. The Granite State, we're one of 8 states with no individual income tax at all, although we had an interest and dividends tax until just last year. And those other 43 states, most of them peg it. It's often a flat rate. It would have to be a flat rate here in New Hampshire unless you do make some more changes to the Constitution, or it's a graduated system. But it's usually based on the adjusted gross income number on the tax forms, which hopefully most of us filled out today, in which many of us will be. And I think you even have to put it on your estimated tax form if you're one of those people who hasn't finished their 1040 yet. But and there's a lot of bipartisan anxiety about it, about the prospect, but no such bill has come anywhere close to passing. What's wrong?
Representative, I want to interrupt you for a minute. On your pink card, you said you were going to speak for about 3 minutes.
Yes, I assumed you would be limited to 90. Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm speaking.
Yeah, thank
We've
you.
got you in at about 6 minutes now.
Thank
Are
you.
you about to wrap up?
Well, I'm pretty close to the end anyway. I figured, just to explain, I figured you would be telling everyone that they would only have 2 minutes or 3 minutes, so I was just trying to be aspirational.
You wrote 3 minutes on your pink card, so I'm just going by what you
Okay,
wrote.
I did not understand. I was just respecting what I thought you would be doing, and you did some credit,
All
different
right.
if it's right. So perhaps I should have put down 7 minutes, but then you'd be telling me you would, anyway. And I'm near the last sentence of what I said anyway. So even if this amendment fails, it's highly unlikely that a state income tax will be passed anytime soon. And so this amendment, and actually the underlying bill, which you could still send to the floor, I think they're both unnecessary and counterproductive. So I would just, unless you want to take my suggestion I made at the beginning of the speech, which I think probably you don't, I urge you to vote ITL on this amendment. So thanks.
Thank you. All right, seeing no questions, we will move on.
I'd be happy to take any questions.
There's no questions. Thank you. All right, next I have Representative Steve Smith. And he'll be followed by Representative Ken Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for hearing me today. I'm Representative Stephen Smith, Sullivan County District 3, Charlestown, Unity, and Newport. I got to say, this isn't going nearly as badly as I expected. What I expected was a day of random tax policy debates and impassioned speeches for income tax good, income tax bad. You know what? Doesn't matter. It's not the question before the committee today. The question before the committee today is the process and the participants. So for me, it came down to 3 questions. 1, if we're ever going to have an income tax, should it be wicked hard? 2, should it require bipartisan support? And 3, should it be with the consent of the people? So for me, that's yes, yes, and yes, and that's why I'm going to support this amendment and the underlying bill. I talked to someone who said, you know, if we pass this thing, though, it's going to be almost impossible to implement an income tax. I said, okay, if we pass it, literally nothing happens. It just goes on the ballot. The sum total of our work is to put words on paper. That's it. When things do happen is when enough of the voters say, yeah, I'm going to vote for this, and then it passes, and then it becomes an actual amendment. Now, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of the answer. For that matter, as you might suspect, I really hope it passes, but I recognize that it might not with the voters. I'm not afraid of that answer, too. I work for them. Whatever they want, that's what I want to give them. If I was totally convinced that if we send this thing out, the voters are actually going to pass it, how can you vote no? The will of the voters ultimately has to be what matters. So I ask the committee, as you go through this process, however you feel about an income tax, think about the process, because that is the only question before the committee. If we have an income tax, should it only be with a bipartisan coalition with the consent of the people? Do they get to decide? They're the ones that it affects. I say they get to decide. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I won't take any questions because you can pepper me all you want when we inject this puppy. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Ken Weiler. followed by Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. 20 years ago, I chaired Division II of the Finance Committee, and for a couple of 3 terms, we did the same job you're doing here today. We did the revenue estimates, we handled the tax bills. At the time, for a brief period, there was no Ways and Means. So I've been involved with these taxes for over 20 years. I also, as a member of the American Legislative Exchange Council, have been about that same period of time on the Tax and Fiscal Policy Task Force. I forgot to say I'm Ken Weiler. I represent Kingston and East Kingston and Rockingham County. I chair Finance Committee. I'm here today to give you some of the experiences that convinced me that an income tax is the worst possible tax. We were looking at things at ALEC. We were looking at comparing different states. There were 8 states at the time with no income tax, and obviously 42 that had. And of those 8 states, they all had better economies than the states that had income taxes. And the ones that had the highest income taxes had the worst economy, slower growth, more problems with the government, and so on. We were far ahead of them because we had a better economy, as do all the states that do not have an income tax. And more of them, through those years I've been on that task force, are reducing their income tax. Some of them are working toward going to 0. So one of the stories we heard at those meetings was the gentleman from Colorado. They relied for 60% of their revenue on a personal income tax. And so they had a great year in 2000. Now, they also had a thing that if they didn't know how much they'd bring in from an income tax, so it brought in more than they estimated, they had to mail back rebates to every person who paid a tax. So they had a nice year in 2000. 2001 comes and a lot of the economy took quite a slump, especially in Colorado. They lost 20% of their revenue because the people that were making the big money weren't making it anymore and weren't paying the taxes. So they didn't mail out the rebates that year. They had to do a whole bunch of changes to their revenue system to take care of that problem. It's a very indefinite source of income. It's unreliable. In the years I've worked with Ways and Means as the Finance Committee, I've come to rely very heavily on what you tell me is the revenue for the next 27 months when you give me the figure. And it's been very close. And I have a lot of faith in the Ways and Means Committee. But it's also because we have some fairly reliable sources of income. And surprisingly, in some years where the economy wasn't that great, we did a little better. The rich people from Massachusetts and Connecticut that were going to go away to Europe for the summer, well, maybe we'll just rent a place in Winnipesaukee for a week or 2. And, well, we're not going to ski in Vail this year. We'll just ski in New Hampshire. So some of our revenue picked up while other states were seeing a loss because we relied on this 20 different taxes, and they somehow, when one was up, one was down. And it helps us all in this business as we're looking for how much money we have to spend. I had a visit to the Revenue Administration after they had moved to a new building that a landlord had built especially for them. And I said to the commissioner, I said, it doesn't look like you're using all the space. And he said, well, they made this building a third bigger than we asked because they think we're going to pass an income tax and we'll use the rest of the building to do that. It's a very expensive income tax to administrate. At one point when somebody said, well, if we just kept a low income tax, maybe people wouldn't object. So we looked at, okay, here's how much you want to, I forget whether it was 2 or 3%. It would have cost 18% to collect it. It's very intrusive. It's a very terrible tax. It's unpredictable. It's so irritating for people because they hate it. Now, okay, we've heard so damn much about spending problems in New Hampshire. They all come down to the school system. No matter how much we give them, they spend twice that. Every year on the budget, say we go up 2-3% for what we give them on a per pupil basis. they go up 4 or 5%. And this goes on, and they have a system that's set up so you only can vote where only 15% of the population shows up. You can vote for school board and school budget and so on. So it's designed that way, and if you dared not to spend what they asked, they have a human shield, our children. And I hear that every time the school board comes out. Don't you love children? You're evil if you won't vote for this school. That's the problem. That's what we need as a solution, not to try to bring in an income tax. That was the problem they had in New Jersey and Connecticut. Oh, if we only had an income tax, we could have a lower property tax. It never happened. My son lives in New Jersey, has a nice home. His property tax rates are about equal to mine. And he has an income tax in New Jersey as well. So to come and say, oh, if we only had an income tax, we could do something about the property tax, we need to reform public education. That's the spending problem we have. We spend more than 40 other states, and one of them, last time I looked, South Dakota spent half what we did per pupil and had about the same rates on the school testing. So to say, oh, we need all this money, it's bull. We spend too much on public education, but that's not the subject of our thing here. I'm here to tell you how lousy an income tax is. It's too expensive, it's too invasive of our privacy, and it never delivers what you think it will. And just ask the states of California and New York and New Jersey, what's the results? The people that that they expect to pay the most taxes are leaving. I don't want that to happen. We've done very well in the 55 years that since I moved here. New Hampshire was number 26 on per capita income. Now we're in the top 4 or 5. That's because people move here because we don't have a lousy income tax, and I sure as hell don't want us to have one, and I hope you will take this into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Next, I have Speaker of the House, Representative Packard.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm going to be fairly brief. I have a question for everybody here. What are we afraid of? The people that elected us, they're our bosses. They're the ones that sent us here. They're the ones that want to make sure that we keep money in their pockets, not in the government's pockets. This is what this bill is about. It's about letting the people that sent us here, who are our bosses, make that decision. And I ask again, what are we afraid of? If we're afraid of letting the people make a decision on something of this consequence, then I think we have a problem. They are the ones that are our bosses. We are not their bosses. So why are we afraid to let them decide if they want to keep more money in their pocket than have us take it out of their pocket? This can be their decision. It's a high hurdle to make, and it's going to be very difficult to probably get past. But by God, let the people make our decisions on whether they want an income tax or not. It's their decision to make. It's not ours. Let them make it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, I have Representative Wheeler. Followed by Representative Farrington.
Thank you, Chairman Janesian and members of the House and Ways and Means Committee. Well, to answer the Speaker's question, I'm not afraid of anything. I support this question being remitted to the people. I believe that most constitutional amendments should be. But I would like to testify to say, what are we doing here? This is obviously a gimmick. In many ways, this does nothing to solve the critical issues that the people of the state of New Hampshire are asking us to solve. It's just a good election topic for a piece of legislation that isn't even proposed before this legislature. for a topic that almost guaranteed will not pass, while, as others have said, our citizens are dealing with rising property taxes, overburdened costs, less services, and a more complex and harder to deal with state government. The way I see it, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be as brief as I can, brevity is the soul of wit, we as a legislature should be discussing those issues and how we can solve them for our citizens as a state, as opposed to gimmick legislation that looks good on a political advertisement. And so, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would just end by saying I hope one day that us here in the most democratic, small d, legislature in the country, if not the world, where all of us elected representatives represent approximately 3,400 people, could come together as a legislature to discuss these issues without the gimmicks and the political gamesmanship and the sort of back and forth between the private political organizations that keep us from having a sensible conversation about where this state will move forward. 250 years of history in the state of New Hampshire under the Constitution of these United States of America, and I'd like it to exist for another 250. But it won't if this legislature stuffs its ears and continues to move forward on these issues in only gimmicks and political gamesmanship. So I will support this. I support the people being able to determine whether or not they want an income tax or not. I'm going to vote against an income tax. I don't support one, but I would hope that eventually we as a legislature can have a sensible discussion about revenue and where we're going to go forward 250 years from now so that we have a state that still exists for our people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Farrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sam Farrington, and I represent Rochester Ward 4. New Hampshire is the live free or die state. Year after year, we are ranked #1 for freedom in the entire country. And I am here today because I support permanently banning an income tax in New Hampshire. People from Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, they are leaving and they are coming to New Hampshire because of our live free or die model. Freedom is maximized and government is limited, as it's supposed to be. Taxation is theft, but taxation is also slavery, and we cannot have a free state if citizens in our granite state are enslaved to the government. Please pass this constitutional amendment.
Thank you. Next up, I have Representative Moffitt, followed by Representative Granger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Moffitt, Merrimack 4, Canterbury Loudon. Very quickly, at first I was going to make a few points on the federal system and red states, blue states, what's out there. There's all kinds of things to look at in terms of policy. And a lot of that's been said, and all I want to say at this point is kind of what the speaker said. This is about letting the people have a voice, so let them have a voice.
Thank you. We do have a question. Are you open to a question?
If it's not from Representative Luno. No.
Representative Hacken Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Moffitt, for taking my question. It sounds in your testimony that you thought that the people of the state of New Hampshire would be supportive of this amendment, and I'm just wondering if you're aware of the current sign-ins for this legislation or constitutional amendment currently stand at 884 folks who support this and 1,227 folks who do not.
Thank you, Representative. Let me just say that I may have been born at night, but I was not born last night. I think a lot of us understand that the folks who sign in are activists and they're prompted to sign in. I would much rather have this go to the whole state as part of a CACR than I certainly look at who signs in, of course, but I don't think that's a barometer that we should trust. I would rather go by letting the whole state have access to this question rather than folks who want to take the time to sign in against it or whatever.
Follow up?
I just want to clarify that your statement seems to be that folks who live in the state of New Hampshire who signed in today do not have a credible opinion on this matter?
No, not at all. I just said we should, and I do, I'm a committee chair, I look at who signs in and what the numbers are. But to your point, I think it's very important to acknowledge that the numbers of people who sign in, we should look at that. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I don't think that is a measure that I would trust as much as letting it be on the ballot in the whole state.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Representative Granger, followed by Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Is taxation theft? Some say it's not because it's legal, and in order for something to be theft, it needs to be illegal. Some say it is better described as extortion because you pay under duress to avoid losing your house or going to jail. Whereas with theft, it is taken usually without any permission at all. They just, take it. When it comes to an income tax, though, I think there's a more appropriate term: slavery. If you work a standard 40-hour work week, then you are essentially working for the government until after lunch on Tuesday. All of Monday, you receive none of the product of your labor. Therefore, the income tax is a lighter, gentler form of slavery. I'm opposed to all slavery, regardless of how light and gentle it may be. Slavery was initially repealed in 1865. The income tax, the federal income tax, was ratified in 1913. That means we didn't even make it 50 years before re-implementing slavery. So I support this constitutional amendment. Please ban an income tax forever. Thank you. No questions.
Thank you so much. I'm Pam Brown, representative from historic Kingston and beautiful East Kingston. I'm also a trained economist, and I have chaired Sanborn's School District Budget Committee, which found $1.1 million in efficient savings from the proposed budget for next year. So it can be done. I'm here to wholeheartedly support the amendment to CACR 12. We should avoid a state income tax at all costs. New Hampshire has ample revenue sources and potential areas for significant public sector savings and tax base growth. Our House Education Funding Committee, for example, is reviewing the nearly $1 billion spent annually on special education, identifying policy solutions to help lower costs and increase non-tax revenues to this massive program. Regarding the expansion of the tax base, Representative Mary Murphy is correct. We should reduce our reliance on tourism and diversify into recession-proof industries, as well as increase supplies of energy, housing, and child care services. 9 states do not have a personal income tax. The Tax Foundation's 2026 State Tax Competitive Index ranks New Hampshire 3rd. It has no income tax, and the top 7 of the 10 states in their survey all had no income tax. The lowest ranked states include New Hampshire, New Jersey, California, Vermont, and Massachusetts, all in the bottom with a significant state income tax. Well-intentioned people who dabble in politics but not so much in economics have suggested that New Hampshire can ease other tax burdens by adding an income tax. Nope, introducing a state income tax generally does not lower overall taxes. Instead, states without an individual income tax consistently bear a lower total per capita tax burden than those with one. Income taxes bring distortions and discourage work and productivity, and we should be wise to remember the Laffer curve. Higher tax rates can reduce tax revenues. To close, the wealth of a state is not a fixed pie. It can grow and expand. Consistently lower taxes incentivize investment, risk-taking, and human capital development by our workers. A zero state income tax accomplishes that. Please vote in favor of this amendment.
Thank you. Any questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you. And there was a question about when do members of the public get to speak. It's very typical in public hearings that all the senators speak, all the representatives speak, and then members of the public. So just to give you an idea of where we are with that, I've got about 6 more representatives, and then we move on to the public. So next up is Representative Valerie McDonald, followed by Representative Freeman.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Valerie McDonald, representing Rockingham 25. New Hampshire was recently ranked #1 in the nation for taxpayer return on investment for the 11th year in a row. That is our competitive advantage. That is the New Hampshire advantage. And that is largely why businesses are fleeing other states to come to New Hampshire. Individuals are fleeing other states to come to New Hampshire. That is the story of my family and of many of my constituents, especially representing a community on the border with Massachusetts. So no, I do not support an income tax, not now, not ever, but I'll tell you what I do support. I support putting this question on the ballot to let the voters decide and to tell us how they feel about an income tax for the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Representative Freeman, followed by Representative Orrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and esteemed members of the House Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Lisa Freeman. I represent Belknap County, District 8, the beautiful towns of Belmont, Tilton, and Samberton. Today, I rise in support of the amendment and the underlying bill of CACR 12. 28 years ago, when my late husband and I decided where we would like to raise our family, we decided that Massachusetts would not be it. We became political refugees of New Hampshire, and proudly so. One of the biggest factors that helped us make our decision was what was the overall tax burden. If anyone knows Massachusetts, as we all typically know being so close to them, and if you're from Massachusetts, some years ago, a few decades ago, Massachusetts put in an income tax and a sales tax. The sales tax was to be temporary at 2%. That was 60 years ago. I was a small child. I do remember it. I also remember that that temporary tax became a permanent tax. And in Massachusetts, at this point, it's at 6.5% with no signs of going down. Once installed, income taxes don't go away. They remain and they become higher. One of the advantages of being a New Hampshire resident is our small representative government. We represent the constituents, and our constituents make a lot of decisions that we want to carry forward. This needs to be on the ballot. Every person in New Hampshire should have a say on what we should do about taxes, specifically income taxes. Again, I am in support of the amendment as well as the underlying CACR 12. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Orrs, followed by Representative J.D. Bernardi. Is Representative Orrs here?
I think he left for a meeting.
Okay. All right, then we will go to Representative J.D. Bernardi.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. J.D. Bernardi, Rockingham counties, Southampton, Kensington, Newton, Plastow, and I'm here in full support of this amendment, and you've heard a number of arguments economically, fiscally, why this is important. You've heard that it may be a gimmick. I don't think it's a gimmick because the progressive agenda said they want a tax, and they put forward a tax. So this is driven by, this response is a drive to say, no, we do not want that tax. So what other reasons should we not have a tax? One of the things that the progressive agenda immediately did, Woodrow Wilson, FDR, and every other Democrat president after that used the income tax and the private information that's provided by that to weaponize it against the citizens. They used it consistently, year after year after year. We do not need a statewide system where people's private information has to be provided to the government for government officials to potentially backdoor use that information against its citizens. So again, the economic arguments, the fiscal arguments are compelling, but there's also a major privacy argument that's relevant with respect to income tax.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Representative Dilemmas, followed by Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here and listening to all of us. I know it takes a while. Susan DeLamus, Farmington, New Hampshire, District 1. And I didn't know whether to come for myself or whether to come for my constituents, but I know I've lived here my entire life. And I remember in Laconia, I was driving down Weirs Boulevard, and it was in the 1970s at some point. And we were hearing about axe the tax, and there was talk of income tax, and there was also talk of having an amendment put on the ballot. And I remember that got defeated. And I was really mad about that because I wanted to be able to vote. I wanted to be able to have my say as to how I wanted my money spent in the state. I was on my way to work. And I just feel that whatever the subject is, if it is going to be put on the Constitution and it's going to affect all the citizens equally, I think that we should give the citizens of this state a voice and let them speak for themselves. Yes, we speak for them as well. Yes, they voted for us and trust us to be here, but there are times when I believe that the citizens that we represent should be allowed to have their own opinion and have it on the ballot so they can say, yeah, I think that's a good idea, or no, I don't. And I know that there was another representative that said that there were 1,000 people who were for it and 800 that weren't. Who knows who's been informed? Who knows where they're getting their information right now? When they get to the ballot and they have it in their hand and they can actually read it, that's when you get the true numbers. Just like when we take a vote in this House, we get the true numbers on the vote. And I think that we need to have the true numbers from our people. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Edwards, followed by Representative Potenza.
Thank you. I'm Representative Jess Edwards, representing Rockingham 31. That's Candia, Chester, Deerfield, and Auburn. And I just want to put my district on the record as being in favor of being trusted enough to make this vote for themselves. So I am in my 5th term. I know fairly resoundingly is because this is the sort of thing they've asked me to come do to look out for them. So if you would like to continue to see migration into New Hampshire from states escaping high taxes, you will put this into our Constitution so that there's long-term assurance that New Hampshire is a great place and we've got the other states around us surrounded. We can push back. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Representative Potenza, followed by Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm wasn't going to speak, but I'm speaking because a constituent had to leave. I want this on the ballot. I think we should have more things on the ballot because same thing, we work for the people, and I think it's great to have their voice. I also want to be just very truthful because it's what I just passed out to the committee, it's really important. This is already protected in our Constitution. Article 12, protection and taxation reciprocal, right here in bold. But no part of a man's property shall be taken from him or applied to the public uses without his own consent or that of the representative body of the people. I really wish that we could put other things on the ballot, like, removing property taxes and putting in a consumption tax, something like that. You never own your property in New Hampshire, you never own your land. And a governor, it doesn't matter what governor is going to say, whether it's a D or an R by their name, they can't do anything. They can't put an income tax in, they can't file a bill. It's by the representatives, their legislative body that does this. So throw it on the ballot, that would be great, but it would be really wonderful if we spent our time fixing some of the issues that are crippling our state. I'm in Stratford District 19 in Rochester. My constituents are being leveled with property taxes from fraudulent assessments and everything else. I put a bill in to try to help with that, and that was killed. So I hope we start really doing more for the people. And if this is going to give them a voice and get them energized, then let's start putting in other CACRs that actually fix some other problems that we have in the state.
Thank you. Okay, the last representative to speak, based on pink cards I have, is Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, I am Erica Leon, representing the great town of Derry, which is Rockingham 13. The people of New Hampshire have given the greatest political power to state government, subject to the directions that they give us in the Constitution. The people of New Hampshire are largely want to be left alone, except when they need to make sure that the government is there for some needed purpose, and otherwise they'd like it to just stay out of the way so they can live their life, keep their money, raise their family, and be a good community member. They have given us instructions that they expect us to follow. That is the Constitution. Those instructions are updated as needed, and I believe that a constitutional ban on an income tax is needed now. This decision isn't up to us, it is up to our bosses. Our bosses are the voters, and in particular, those who show up every 2 years in November to ensure that this state keeps serving them. For a long time, discussing an income tax in New Hampshire was the best way to end your political career. But in recent years, we've heard a yearning for new taxes. When I was on the Education Committee, it was referred to as that tax which shall not be named. But just earlier this year, on the steps of this very building, a prominent politician, surrounded by some people in this very room, proposed an income tax. The people remain opposed to an income tax, but some of those they elect have clearly become covetous of other people's money. We have the opportunity to send this to our bosses, the voters. Now, I assume that we all agree a lot more on how great the Patriots are than a lot of different political issues we deal with today, so I'll reference some words from one of the greatest coaches from that team. Do your job. Listening to our bosses is not a gimmick, it is our job. It's time for us to do our job and send this question to the 1 million registered voters in New Hampshire so we can have a real vote on an income tax. Thank you.
Thank you. I got one more pink card at the last minute, so we have one more representative, Representative Post.
I'm Lisa Post. I have New Boston, Limeboro, and Limeboro, New Boston, and Mount Vernon. Sorry. We moved here from the Chicago area. It was so expensive, we couldn't afford to live there anymore. We've moved all around the country, but when we started to look, as we were looking towards us to have a place to retire to, we thought, where would we go? And we went to everything in New England. We had both grown up there, and when we started to see the differences in these states, we decided to check out New Hampshire. And we kind of thought it was like a hick thing. We have dirt roads and things like that. But it became a wonderful, we lived here, we moved here, we moved here in 2014. And we have a wonderful community there. And no one wants an income tax. We talk about it at town hall, in our meetings. It is expensive enough right now. And the folks should be having their own voice in the ballot and let them choose it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now we move on to, that's all the pink cards I have for senators and representatives. We move on to the public. And what I would ask is if you feel like you're offering something new, please say it. We do have an egg timer up here. We're going to limit it to 3 minutes, just in interest of time and so forth. And so obviously you don't have to go 3 minutes. If you can do it in less than 3 minutes, great, but we will stop you at 3 minutes. Thank you. And first I'll call up Michael Leon, and he'll be followed by Matthew Girding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Before I start, I do want to say I've been listening to the discussion, and I find it highly repugnant that members of this committee have never read the New Hampshire Constitution, which describes your powers, your limits on your power, that this body has the ability, the power, the duty, or obligation to trust voters is repugnant. That said, I appreciate the testimony that's been up here. I think something absolutely clutch in this 250th year of both our state Constitution anniversary as well as our country Constitution, we need to look back upon it. There's a document written, it was about a 45-minute speech. What to the slave is the 4th of July. It was written by Frederick Douglass. I highly suggest reading it. It is absolutely amazing. This person who had lived in slavery and escaped the bondage of those horrible chains didn't ask for redistribution, which is exactly what an income tax is. He asked for equality. That is important. Based on the questions up here, I have questions for you. What do you call it when you confiscate the labor of another person? There's a name for that. We outlawed it with the 13th Amendment. What do you call it when you take someone else's money without their consent? We outlawed that with the 13th Amendment. An income tax is repugnant. It is designed to redistribute money. It is something that is absolutely vile and not needed. Something new here that I hope everyone will take in and celebrate in this absolutely awesome state in which we live. We have by far and have for decades had the lowest poverty in this country of any state or territory, and among the lowest in the entire world. That is not an accident. That is something we should celebrate. The lowest poverty. Poverty is causally linked to violence. When I hear people talking about gun control and they want an income tax, you want more violence then. It's ridiculous. If you have more poverty, you're going to have a lot more problems. Violence among them, lower performance in schools. An income tax will be destructive to this state. Please put this forward and trust the voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Matthew Girding, followed by Julie Smith.
Thank you to the chair and the members of the committee. My name is Matthew Girding. I'd first like to say for a committee and body that is interested in hearing from the voices of the people, it's kind of ironic that we happen to go last after all of our representatives and senators. I understand it's the rules, but I do find it a bit ridiculous. I am the mayor of the city of Somersworth. I am also a public school teacher. I'm here today representing not just my community of Somersworth, but also over 75 locally elected officials from across the state of New Hampshire who signed a letter to speak out against this amendment. Why did we sign this? Simply because every day as local elected officials, we hear from hardworking people throughout our communities who are doing everything right by their lives, but still are falling behind. Housing costs are far too high. Gas is currently rising faster than it has in many, many years, if not decades. Childcare is out of reach for many, and property taxes continue to go up. People feel squeezed from every direction because of failed Republican policies that the state has been pushing for years. And with folks like myself who signed this letter, we are the ones that are on the front lines trying to respond to these policies day in and day out. We tried to build our local budgets with fairness and compassion. In fact, just this past week, the city of Somersworth passed our budget. It was, in fact, tax cap compliant, thank you. But we are the ones who have to make those tough calls in order to, confront what is happening with the people that live in our communities when the state cuts taxes for corporations and the ultra-rich. And then they continue to push those costs onto us at the local level. That's why we oppose this amendment. It doesn't lower costs. It doesn't do anything to reduce property taxes. It doesn't make life more affordable for the people that we all serve. And I honestly feel like it's a distraction from the real issue, which is a system that has been rigged over time to give tax breaks to the wealthy and large corporations here in the state, while working people like myself and the people that I represent are asked to pay more and more and get less in return from the state of New Hampshire. Granite Staters believe in fairness. This I believe as well. They believe everyone should pay their fair share so our communities can be strong, safe, and stable. We need real solutions that help people afford to live here, not just policies that shift the burden back onto them. So I would encourage the committee to instead consider an amendment to ban tax cuts to corporations and the ultra wealthy rather than this. Thank you. And if it's okay with the chair, I will submit the letter to the committee.
Yes, please. Any questions? Representative, will you take questions? No? Okay. Next, I've got Julie Smith,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
followed by Nasri Angel. Okay, you may start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I support CACR 12. In 2022, you might remember Lily Tang Williams saying, "I fear that the country I love is becoming the country I left." New Hampshire is the state I love, and Massachusetts is the state I left. And I left Massachusetts to move to New Hampshire so long ago that it was right around the time Kelly Ayotte was entering law school. So it was a long time ago. And she ran and got elected on a campaign saying, "Don't mass up New Hampshire." Both of those candidates that I mentioned, I voted for. What I did not vote, or who I did not vote for in 2018 were the 4 members of the legislature that misrepresented me in 2019 by voting for an income tax. That's SB 1, and I see that Rep. Sweeney is no longer here. I wanted to point out that even though he said that taxes originate in the House, SB 1, it's my understanding by the numbering that it originated in the Senate. 2 of those reps are still in office today, and that ex-senator is now running for the executive council again. Let's be clear that calling an object by another name does not negate the truth. Calling an income tax family leave is certainly free speech, but it is still an income tax. We regularly hear members in both chambers addressing their peers with words of warning that someone else will be in their seats in the future. I believe Rep. Berry said it first today, or made reference to that. CACR 12 is an extra layer of protection, political PPE, if you will, against being steamrolled by rogue legislatures in the future. People who think that it's okay for 51% to rob the other 49% who disagree with them. Let's get this on the November ballot and let the voters decide. Vote O2P. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, I have Nasri Angel, followed by Lucas Loriski.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee for the time. I am just up on my 1-year anniversary of having moved to New Hampshire from California, and prior to that from Massachusetts. So hopefully that buys me a little credibility to speak here today. I'd love to frame this discussion in a slightly different way than how it's been framed. When I think about this, I think about growth. I'm trying to build a company based on AI, so I've been in tech my whole career. And if you think about AI, the biggest centers right now for development of AI are San Francisco and Cambridge, Massachusetts. The question I ask is, why not New Hampshire? Why isn't New Hampshire part of that conversation? So we're being faced with like a tsunami of change that's coming, whether we like it or not. AI is going to reshape everything. Every single thing that we do is going to be reshaped by AI, including your local economy. So you talked a lot about your constituents, their concerns, property taxes, which are all valid. I'm not trying to explain any of that away. But what happens when, God forbid, we are not prepared for AI to come in and disrupt your local economies? All of your constituents are going to lose their jobs. And nobody wants that to happen. So nobody wants to be in a situation where we do such a good job of balancing a budget, we do such a good job of implementing an income tax, but we forget to consider this tsunami of change that's coming, that's going to affect everybody's livelihoods. So we can't just think about this defensively, we have to think about this offensively. How is the state of New Hampshire going to prepare itself and protect its constituents to be able to face this tsunami of change that's coming? Step one is you have to become an attractive state such that people from these innovation centers are incentivized to come and build here, to create jobs here, to bring income and job opportunities here. And being able to pass this amendment is a incredible step forward as part of a multi-pronged package to make New Hampshire more attractive. It's not the only thing, right? I think AI subsidies, AI data centers, that should all be part of the conversation. But having no income tax is a real attractive and a draw for people, it's particularly in the tech industry, to come and build here. I would love to attract employees to come and live here and build here and be part of what's going on here in New Hampshire, but you gotta give us something, right? You gotta give us a tool. And you know, when you talk to people in their 20s and 30s, nobody's doing this detailed calculus about, you know, the budget and the... People are either going to think income tax or no income tax. It's very simple. So I would say just think about that, particularly the people who oppose this. Think about how attractive New Hampshire is going to be and how prepared the state of New Hampshire is going to be to face this wave of disruption that's coming. And is New Hampshire going to be equipped to attract the best talent that's going to be at the forefront and play a leadership role in this disruption? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for holding this hearing here today. My name is Lucas Coriati, I'm 24, and I oppose this constitutional amendment not because I support an income tax, but because of what it represents in the current Granite State political climate. We reach new levels of income inequality every day in this country, and I believe this legislature has not only failed to mitigate the crisis, but worsened it. I do not claim to speak for every member of my generation, but what I hear about are concerns about cuts to higher education, rising housing, and rising healthcare costs. I assure you, none of us are clamoring for yet another cut to the business enterprise tax. On the federal level, we are spending over $1 billion a day on yet another war in the Middle East, and this state has lost another $1 billion in revenue over the course of the last 10 years. We are rightly discussing crushing property taxes, in my view, a result of our state's inability to raise the proper amount of revenues to run essential services, instead shifting the burden onto our towns. A point was made about the amendment tying the hands of not just this legislature, but of future generations. I agree, and think ahead to issues like the rising rate of climate change-related disasters in the South. We are one of the most insulated states from the impacts of climate change in the nation, and as home insurance costs in states like Florida become unbearable for homeowners, I don't think it's unfair to believe many of those folks might move up here and further apply stress to our housing, education, and healthcare sectors. How can we properly address potential crises like these if we continue to hamstring our legislature's ability to deal with them? I urge you to reject this amendment and delay this yearly stunt one more year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Cynthia Rousas, followed by Daniel Richard.
Hi there, my name is Cynthia Rousas. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I thought of myself as a unique speaker. Can you hear me?
Yes.
A little louder. I thought of myself as a unique speaker because unlike most people in this room, I am a slightly new resident to the state. I moved here in 2023. The reason for that was that I had children that were going to high school here. My husband and I were living in Massachusetts at the time. Both of us were born and raised in New Jersey and spent a good 10 years living in Manhattan. When we spent time in New Hampshire, we discovered a lot of wonderful things about the state. But what we weren't focused on and what we learned was one of the greatest benefits of living in the state is the incredible tax benefits of a no-tax state. It's hard for folks that have lived here for a long time to really understand the impact of that tax structure on people who are considering moving from different states. As a matter of fact, my husband and I are so passionate about the benefits that we're receiving from no income tax that my in-laws and my mother-in-law have just closed on a house in this state. We have friends that are coming up here this summer to look for housing, and the list goes on and on. We feel grateful to have escaped Massachusetts, and the idea that New Hampshire would willingly put themselves into the category of states that are consuming residents with income tax is really shocking to us. One of the funny things about my in-laws moving to this state is that we are not like-minded politically, yet they are moving here because of no income tax. So we have to have family conversations about not voting out the no income tax. So I'm going to request, as a personal favor, that you allow this to go onto the ballot. I'm confident that many of the residents of New Hampshire feel similarly that I do. And you can really help me out with some family conversations by letting this pass and letting the public have a vote on this decision. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Richard, followed by Elizabeth Hamill. Is Daniel Richard here? Okay, I don't think he is here. So we'll move on to Elizabeth Hamill.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I don't really have much to say except that I find it grossly typical that Democrats are looking for another way to tax the working class people. If we had a dime for every time they said, pay your fair share, tax the millionaires, but they've moved up to the billionaires because many of them are millionaires. It's getting tiresome. We don't have a money problem, we have a spending problem. And a good portion is in our schools where there is declining enrollment. We have horrible stats. Kids are graduating, they can't read, do simple math. New Hampshire doesn't want a tax. And for the people here saying that we don't deserve a voice and that you're here to represent us, we voted for you to hear our voice, and you are the vessel of our voice. New Hampshire does not want a tax unless we all want to change it to live or die. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia Thorell, followed by Zane Hill.
Cynthia Thorell, Pembroke, New Hampshire. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I am a New Hampshire native. I've lived here for 71 years. I hate to admit that, but 71 years I've lived here. And this state has been very independent-minded. The words live free or die. They're our motto, and they were invoked in 1945 by the New Hampshire legislature. Our state emblem is also the old man in the mountains. This embodies a Yankee character of self-reliance, community, enduring strength, and freedom. Freedom that persists in local identity in New Hampshire and a don't tread on me attitude, mirroring the state's political independence. It is the embodiment of what New Hampshire has always stood for. New Hampshire is often regarded as having a high degree of independence in protecting individual liberties, highlighted by its constitutionally enshrined Bill of Rights, lack of income, sales tax, and minimal personal restrictions, such as no adult seatbelt laws. Regardless of how people feel about income taxes, what I feel here is that this amendment has nothing to do with income taxes in my case. What it has to do with is choice. My choice as a voter and a resident of this state. I'm appalled that the legislature has decided to take away my rights to vote on this subject, and what are we going to get down the road? Are we going to get more rights taken away from us, written into this Constitution, and enacted as law? Whether I believe in income taxes or not, I'm not going to state that because that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the independence of New Hampshire voters. Don't take away our choice to vote on anything we want in this state. We voted you in to be our voice and listen to our voices because they matter. We'll be voting again toward the end of this year, and bills like this matter. I have watched and taken part in bills over the past year, and especially recently, that the majority of people don't want, yet they get passed. I really don't quite understand that, except for the fact that people aren't listening to us. So please don't take away our independence that we've had for so many years and allow us to make the choice of whether we want an income tax or not. It's our choice, not yours, to write into the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. Zane Hill, followed by Roberta Cropsey. Is Zane Hill here? It doesn't look like it, so Roberta Cropsey.
Hi, I'm Roberta Cropsey from Tilton. I've lived in New Hampshire for 36 years, and in the past I was a financial analyst in the financial strategies group at a Wall Street investment bank. And one of my jobs was to notice trends. And there are two I want to bring up that are relevant here. First of all, businesses want certainty. With the certainty of having no income tax, you will attract more businesses, large and small, to this state and add to the state's revenue. Number two, by adding potentially an income tax, you increase the total tax bite for everyone. And when that happens, income reporting goes underground. There's underreporting, there's more of a cash economy. You end up with fewer resources, less money coming to New Hampshire. And finally, just as a resident of New Hampshire, I want the ability to vote on this. I don't want this to be taken away from the people who live here. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you. Laura Russell Miller, I don't know if I'm saying that right, followed by Pedro Sarin.
Sorry,
Okay,
I think
go
I
ahead.
probably didn't write clear enough. Should I bring my letter up first, or?
It doesn't matter. You can.
Okay, I'll bring it
you
up
can
after. All right. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and members of the committee. My name is Laura Ruddle Miller. I'm a Keene resident and a city councilor. I am here representing myself, and I am here in opposition of CACR 12. I want to start by reframing this conversation. This is often being presented as a divide between people who love taxes and people who hate taxes, and that is not what this is about. This is about whether we are going to constitutionally restrict the ability of future lawmakers and voters to make decisions about how we fund the services our communities rely on. New Hampshire already has strong protections in place. For over 2 centuries, taxation has required the consent of the people through their elected representatives. That principle is not under threat. So I think the key question here is, what problem are we trying to solve with this amendment? Where is the evidence that we are on the verge of adopting income taxes that require this barrier? At the same time, we have made significant policy choices over the past several years to reduce state revenue. The interest and dividends tax has been phased out, which previously brought in over $100 million annually. We've also reduced the business enterprise tax over time, and those decisions don't eliminate costs, they just shift them. And in New Hampshire, that shift shows up at the local level. Municipalities are under increasing strain, and property taxpayers are carrying more of the burden. And that means, for this, we are limiting the ability of future legislators and voters to respond to changing economic conditions, infrastructure needs, and education funding challenges. We are not eliminating taxes, we are just deciding who is paying them. And this amendment would make it much harder than ever to reconsider that balance. One thing that I want to add as well is that it has been really interesting for the past over 2 hours to hear people say that they're here to hear from the people and then to just continuously speak over them for multiple hours. This is my first time testifying in front of you. It is also my birthday that I have now spent 2.5 hours here listening to representatives talk. So I just think that people should maybe take other people's time into more consideration. Also, we've never had a state income tax, so I'm not sure where all these large businesses and corporations have been waiting to jump in on this, but like this isn't changing anything, so I'm confused by that sentiment as well. All that to say, I respectfully urge you to vote against CACR 12, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Representative Murphy? Representative Murphy, did you have a question?
Was there a question?
Sorry, yeah, the question basically was, were you aware, you asked about whether or not there was something precipitating this bill, and I just wanted to understand, were you aware of the 3-3 plan that was put forward by the opposition party?
Yes, I understand. I think a conversation around taxing and tax structure is not the same as a bill on the floor that is in danger of passing, and that is not what has occurred.
Okay, fair enough. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I can't read this that well. It's Pedro Satel or Satem or Satai. He may not be here, so. Okay. So next is Mary Wilkie.
Thank you. My name is Mary Wilkie. I'm from Concord, property taxpayer there. I've heard a number of statements about taxation being theft, and I just wanted to mention that Articles 1 and 2 of the New Hampshire Constitution say, All government of right originates from the people, is founded in consent, and instituted for the general good. Every member of the community has a right to be protected by it, and he is therefore bound to contribute his share in the expense of such protection. So it's not theft, it's the price we pay to live in a government that provides services to us. In exercising their power to assess taxes, common sense says that legislators should have all possible alternatives to consider and determine what's optimal based on the times and the circumstances that they're presented with. If a given revenue source is unacceptable to some lawmakers, they should make their case, and the normal procedures should be used, resulting in a vote decided by the majority, as has been happening in the past. Some have testified that most Granite Staters don't want an income tax, and for purposes of argument, I'll assume that's true. If it is, then we don't need this resolution. Voters will vote for representatives who oppose an income tax, and a majority of lawmakers will continue to vote against it. But it seems to me to be anti-democratic, and I mean a small d democratic, for a group of lawmakers and voters in 2026 to take off the table for all time, from here to eternity, a revenue source that at some point in the future might be preferred by the majority of Granite Staters. You have no way to predict here and now, as somebody who was speaking about AI mentioned and somebody spoke about climate change, we have no way to predict here and now what facts and circumstances citizens and lawmakers in the future might face and what solutions they might seek. And it feels to me wrong to tie their hands. And saying that future voters could just undo a constitutional amendment underestimates the high hurdle that would be required for that and might obstruct the majority will for years. So for these reasons, I ask you to vote ITL on the non-germane amendment and also the underlying bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Representative Mattson. Oh, you want to go last?
I was actually just speaking as myself, not as the state rep. In the district that I live, I am a voiceless person. Every time I go to vote, my voice isn't heard because my representative is on the other side of the aisle. So what I wanted to say is that I think that we as voters should all be able to vote on whether or not we have this. So it should be on the ballot. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Next, I have Nick Hobart, followed by Carly Benoit.
Hello, my name is Nick Hobart, and I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I am here in strong support of CA-CR 12. I've bent over to speak in this thing. New Hampshire has long been the envy of New England because we have no broad-based income tax or sales tax. This is no accident. This has protected working families, small businesses, and individual liberty. I mean, this is the live free or die state after all. First, CA-CR 12 does not ban taxes outright. It simply raises the bar so that any broad-raised tax on personal income, be that earned or unearned, sales, capital gains, inheritance, estate, or anything similar, especially the income tax, would require a 2/3 supermajority in both chambers of the General Court. So requiring a supermajority forces a real consensus as it ensures that any new tax has broad bipartisan support rather than being rammed through on a simple majority. Because I feel like the broad majority of New Hampshire residents, as has been brought up previously by other speakers, we don't feel like we have a voice enough. We should have more of a say on things. This protects taxpayers from sudden massive tax hikes that hurt the very people trying to build a better life in New Hampshire. I am firmly against the income tax because it punishes productivity, it discourages work and investment, and it treats citizens as revenue sources rather than free individuals. The current model, which is low taxes, property taxes aside, and high liberty has served us well. CA-CR 12 helps protect that model by making it harder for future legislatures to throw it away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have Carly
Barriant. Yes. Hello.
Okay, hi.
Hi. Chair, members of the committee, I am Carly Barriant. I am a candidate for Congress in the 1st District, chair of the Hampton Select Board, and serve on the Hampton Budget Committee. Today, I'm here speaking in my personal capacity and in opposition to this amendment. Every week, I see up close what the frankly fiscally irresponsible decisions being made in this building and in Washington, D.C. are doing to our communities. I hear from elderly residents who this winter had to choose between heating their homes and paying their property taxes. I hear from 80-year-olds who have had to go back to work in order to afford their property tax increases, and from families who are hanging on by their fingernails. You know this. When costs go up and state and federal support gets pulled back, it does not make the needs disappear. Instead, it makes higher municipal and school budgets, it makes higher property taxes, and it makes our household budgets even more strained. It means we can't afford to pave our roads, keep our libraries open, or hire enough firefighters or paraprofessionals for our schools. The New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute just put numbers to what we know. New Hampshire property taxpayers pay the 2nd highest per capita property taxes in the country. We are paying more and we are getting less because this state has chosen again and again to pass the costs on to us. New Hampshire ranks 48th in state aid to cities and towns, 48th out of 50. Someone has to pay for a government to function, and right now that someone is working families like mine. Not the wealthiest homeowners, not corporations, working families. Lower income households pay a far greater share of what they earn in property taxes, and that is by design. It is unfair, it is regressive, and it is unsustainable. I serve in a purple community, and I know that this is not a partisan issue. I don't like my tax dollars paying for school vouchers or for the war in the Middle East, but I pay my taxes because taxes are what we pay to live in a civilized society. The people in this building here have a choice. You can keep blaming our communities for a crisis that you have helped create, or you can act like real partners to the people that you represent. We deserve better, and I implore you to please use your time to work to make life more affordable for the people in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I apologize, I can't read the last name, but Bonnie from Hollis.
Thank you for having this hearing today, and thank you for that previous speaker.
Could you,
eloquent.
Could you state your last name?
Bruno.
Bruno?
Bonnie Bruno, Hollis.
Okay.
Okay. This is under 2 minutes, and then I'm going to try to freelance some stuff that I was taking notes on while I've been listening here. But I will tell you, though, that this is the longest time I've waited to testify up here with the smallest audience. So, but anyway. I oppose CACR 12. CACR 12 is many things, but it's not serious legislation. It's performative partisan politics with a false promise that when it bumps up into reality, it's like walking into a bear in Grafton. At its heart, CACR 12 aligns with broader movement with the Republican-controlled legislature that attempts to limit government through structural barriers, rather than engage in democratic debate. We can debate tax policy all day long, and we should, because that's exactly what this legislative body is supposed to do. And that debate is how voters have a voice in the policies that affect their lives. CACR 12 doesn't just avoid debate, it strangles the voice of the voters in our state, Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Over the past 2 decades, New Hampshire has repeatedly shifted political control between parties because voters assert their will and redirect the state, which is how a functioning democracy works, when it's not gerrymandered. The real New Hampshire advantage is the voters. Voters who are engaged and want to have a say in their policies that affect their lives now and in the future. The real New Hampshire advantage, got that erased, sorry. And CICR 12 in both the Senate and the House forms shuts down that option. This committee should do the right thing and ITL this. You know, for everything that was said here, I think I have like an opposing view. So, you know, I have someone in my life who went through the New Hampshire public school systems and got a full scholarship to Brown University. Thank you, New Hampshire public schools. So if you want to attract AI type talent, we're going to have no public schools. You're going to have crumbling public schools. Who's going to come move here for that? I don't want to make the decision today in 2026 for a future generation whose circumstances are going to be different than what we're living with now. And that's the democratic debate that's supposed to happen in the legislature. And just to change it in 5 years, a constitutional amendment, doesn't work that way. Has to make it out of a committee, unless I'm mistaken. So if it doesn't make it out of a committee, you're not going to be able to get a chance to vote on that again. So this isn't about income tax. It's not about taxes. It's about structural barriers that prevent you from being able to engage in your government. That's what this is about. It's not taxes. I'd love to talk tax policy. 47% increase in my property taxes. My property didn't change. Has the same value, made no changes to it. But I also believe in paying my fair share for a civilized society that we live in and that we share, especially our public services. So this isn't about, do we want an income tax in New Hampshire or not? That's not what this is about. CACR 12 is about structural barriers for people being able to have a voice in their government. That's what it's about. Tax policy should be debated in the legislature all day long. And I am happy to take a question.
Thank you.
Did I do under 3 minutes?
And just so you know, what's that?
I said I usually go right up to my time. I feel like I want to say a little bit more, but I'll end on that.
You went past 3 minutes, but I let you keep talking.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Very kind.
And just to let you know, the way it works is it will always come out of the committee. Either it's going to come out ITL or it come out ought to pass. And so it still comes out of the committee. It comes to the full House, and the full House votes on that recommendation.
Right, but that full House has to vote for that to get on the ballot. So depending on what your legislature looks like, it may not ever make it back on the ballot in 5 years, is kind of what I'm saying.
So the way it works is the full House then has to vote on it, and it's got to come OTP with at least 3/5 vote to then move on to the Senate. They've got to have 3/5. The governor has to sign it. Then it would go to the people for the November ballot.
Right, but for order for it to move out of the government, it depends on what that political power and control looks like for it to be able to move, is the point that I think people should remember. Is it's just not that easy to go ahead and get it on the ballot. Somebody had said that here today. I think a representative said, go ahead, change it in 5 years, just put it back to the people. It's not that easy. It's the only thing I want people to keep in mind.
Yeah.
But thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, no problem. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. All right, next up is Dan McGuire.
Yes, no? All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here today late, I guess, because I'm the chairman of Granite State Taxpayers, the statewide taxpayer organization. And as that title might give you the idea, we're very strongly in favor of CACR 12. We would be in favor of the original version, the amended version, some other version, anything that restricts or reduces taxes, we're in favor of. But I wanted to speak briefly on why it's particularly good to restrict income tax. And that's because income tax is a tax, well, taxes in general are more than just revenue raisers for government. They also affect people's, what people do, how they act, right? It changes people's behavior because people change their own behavior to avoid paying taxes, right? And so income is productivity, right? And the opposite of income is spending, right? Consumption. So if you have a choice between taxing income or taxing consumption, like a cell phone tax or a cigarette tax or whatever, it's much better to tax consumption than to tax income, because lower consumption means you'll have more savings, right? You'll have more income, more savings, and the future will be better than the present, right? Because savings creates a better future. That's good, right? That's improvement over time. But if you restrict savings by taxing income and encourage consumption by not taxing it like you're taxing income, right? That's making the future worse. That's making things worse over time. That's not what we want to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I guess we have a question, Representative.
Obviously, I would talk tax policy all day, given the opportunity. So yes,
okay.
I'm happy
Representative Elberger has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative, for taking the question. Based on what you said, I assume you're advocating a sales tax.
Yeah, thank you for the question. If it were a choice between sales tax and income tax, absolutely I would choose a sales tax. I mean, that's the basis of, there's people who are advocating for the United States as a whole, right, having a national sales tax versus the income tax we have now. That would certainly be an improvement. There's specific considerations if you want to implement a general sales tax right now in New Hampshire, because that we have created a situation where a lot of retail is here in New Hampshire because of the fact that we don't have a general sales tax, right? So, you know, on paper, we consume, say, twice as much alcohol as any of the surrounding states per capita. Why? Because state liquor stores charge little, and you know, all those people travel. Similarly, they travel to shop for stuff, right? For TVs and whatever. And so it would be a tough sell to create a general sales tax. But if it meant no income tax, that would be a good thing.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. I have 2 pink cards left, and then we will be done. So next is Zach Sheehan.
Hello, my name is Zach Sheehan. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project. Thanks for setting up this hearing and allowing us to testify. As with a lot of people, what I was going to say kind of changed as I was taking notes and thinking what other folks were saying. The reason we're interested in this and we're opposed to this a non-germane amendment in the underlying CACR, but where this intersects with school funding is obviously property taxes and how we fund our schools. And as a lot of the other speakers have referenced, the limiting future legislators' ability to engage in how we deal with changing circumstances and whether or not we want to have other options just seems very short-sighted. Additionally, I think speaking just to the process of this is a hearing obviously on a non-germane amendment, which is a pretty specific process. It's highly unusual to have a hearing in Reps Hall. There are plenty of hearings where we know for a fact many people are going to show up and it's still held at Granite Place or in smaller hearing rooms. And I think it's just an interesting element of letting people speak, hearing their voices, but like which voices do you actually want to hear from? And how are you trying to engage in those conversations? I think relative to if we're going to be engaging in having conversations about tax policy, for my job, I travel all over the state. Just in the past few weeks was in Rochester, North Conway, Jaffrey, Milford, Merrimack. All those places, people are most interested in folks at the legislature dealing with property taxes, childcare, high housing costs. And the fact that we're spending so much time debating this, which is in theory in response to a proposal by someone who's not an elected official, is just really fascinating to me. Also, that proposal would in theory, reduce property taxes for 80% of the folks in the state, which is not something that's been brought up. But if that is the kind of bar for getting an emergency non-germane hearing in Reps Hall, I would also encourage the committee to look at the report from the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute that just came out, a 22-page report on how challenging it is that we rely so heavily on local property taxes and how that is not helpful. And we do that way out of whack with most other states in the country. And so if some proposal from someone who's not an elected official prompts a really official 3.5-hour hearing, I would hope that a detailed report about why high reliance on property taxes is not helpful for the long-term health of our state, let alone our municipal or school infrastructure, that the committee would consider that too. One last piece I'd like to bring forward is relative to just the overall kind of how people are weighing in on this. The online sign-in numbers were brought up earlier and dismissed as being helpful. When people were actually able to testify after 2.5 or 3 hours of elected officials testifying, it's been about half and half, at least by my tally. And unfortunately, a lot of folks who couldn't stay for 3 hours who had to leave. So just, if this is in the name of hearing from people, if this is in the name of engaging the public, it seems like people are saying that depending on if it fits their narrative or not. And I would just really encourage folks to dig into how to solve some of these problems. 2 last points I'd like to make. There was a bill earlier this session that you all considered and ultimately killed, House Bill 1656, which would have had the Department of Revenue Administration look into how to lower property taxes by providing other revenue sources. That was the entire charge of the bill. How do we raise revenue sources in order to lower property taxes, and specifically asking the department to look for parameters to make sure that low and moderate income households paid less. That was the charge of the bill. It was killed because people on the committee didn't want to talk about an income tax. That is explicitly why they killed that bill. Also, that it might cost some money for the department to do the analysis. So if we actually wanted to have a debate about solving some of the challenges we're looking at in New Hampshire, you continue to have options in front of you, and I would really implore the legislature to engage those so we can actually have fact-based conversations about what policies will have what outcomes. Thank you for the time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I actually have a question for you. I keep thinking about Connecticut, right? 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whenever it was, Connecticut said, you know what? We've got to lower property taxes by having an income tax. So great, they got an income tax. I think it was 3 or 4%. And they started spending on new programs. They didn't really lower property taxes. And if you look at Connecticut today, their income tax is upwards of 7%, and their property taxes are very high. So while it sounds nice, I guess I would ask you, aren't you afraid New Hampshire would go down that same road? We start with a low, I guess it was proposed a 3% income tax. What's to stop it? What's to stop us from becoming Connecticut?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Maybe I'm biased because I grew up here, but I think we're smarter. And I think that, that was half a joke, but also like, this legislature takes feedback from your constituents really seriously. And I think property taxes are the largest issue everyone's facing, and we all know that. And so I would like to think that if the legislature were to engage in any tax reform, that it would be aimed at addressing and reducing local property taxes, and we would continue to hold you all accountable to having that be the end goal. And just like you can't guarantee what future legislatures would do, I can't guarantee the long-term effects of any policy change. But I think that we have plenty of examples we can look at. Massachusetts just did a recent fair share amendment, and they're raising 4 times as much money. Millionaires are not leaving the state. They're having massive investments in their transportation and education systems that are wildly popular across the polling. So we could learn from both. I think also that here in New Hampshire, it'd just be really helpful to learn from, do people want us to work on this? Do they want us to go down this path? I think most people just want their property taxes lower. And if reducing business taxes or cutting the interest and dividends tax were to help with that, we've been doing that for 10 years, and I think we would feel the impact by now.
But you mentioned Massachusetts. Massachusetts put the millionaire's tax in to raise money for other things. But the issue is that what happened? Now some of those millionaires are leaving the state. They're leaving Massachusetts, they're leaving New York, they're leaving California. I mean, it's almost like, you know, it seems like a solution, but it isn't, because it seems like long-term, human nature doesn't change. We're no different than the human nature of 3,000 years ago, and human nature needs to be, if there's not some sort of restriction, you're just going to spend more and more and more. At least that's, I'm looking at these states that are doing that, and that's what's happening. So I guess, you know, what stops that from happening? I know you said we're potentially smarter in New Hampshire. I would say human nature is human nature. We're no smarter than they are in Massachusetts or Connecticut or California, except we have held the line on extra taxes, and we've got a pretty good state. So yeah. I don't know, how would you answer that? That's what I struggle with, and I think others who you know, struggle with that sort of thing. I don't know that there's a limit that it's going to stop.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the question. And you know, I don't mean to make it sound like these are easy decisions to make. Like, I understand these are very complicated things with lots of moving parts, many of which are incredibly complicated. I think two pieces. One, we have an example in New Hampshire of when we instituted the statewide education property tax. That was a brand new tax. We added a roughly $6 tax onto everyone's bill. But average property tax rates, when you added $6, dropped across the state. Our education property tax rates went from $17 and change, just local. We added the statewide property tax, and the average dropped to $13. So we have because of the way we then spent that money. We spent it based on ability to pay. Communities that had really high tax rates, communities got that additional money, passed on the savings to local communities. All of that is data from the DRA and the Department of Education. You can go back and look at it. And so I think there's a pretty interesting example of, in New Hampshire, right, changing a tax system, and the result being more towns had money, and communities made those local decisions, which are so critical to the way we operate in New Hampshire. And most of those local decisions were to pass on some of the savings to property taxpayers, not just to increase spending across the board. And so I think we have some examples, examples there. And then also, you mentioned the idea of millionaires leaving states. Maybe we're looking at different data, but my understanding of all the data that's coming out of Massachusetts is that's just not happening, and it's not happening at the rate that was predicted, and they are raising 4 times as much money as was originally projected.
Well, we just, I don't want to go on too long with this conversation, but we did see Governor of New York, Hochul, I believe, trying to ask millionaires and billionaires to come back to the state. But anyways, we could go on forever with that debate. I see there's a question from Representative Opal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question, Mr. Sheehan. Would you believe that despite the story that is being told about Connecticut, that in fact the income tax that a Republican governor, Lowell Weicker, proposed was never an effort to deal with property taxes, but was in fact a response to a budgetary crisis that the state of Connecticut was facing? There was never any argument by Governor Weicker or members of the legislature that the income tax imposed in Connecticut was intended to lower the property tax. In fact, it was intended to fill a budgetary gap that had been created through other issues. Would you believe that, sir?
I will take your word for it. I don't have any more details on that, but I will take your word for it.
Representative Opal, we will continue to discuss that in the work session upcoming, because whether you're right or not, the point is Connecticut kept raising their rates so that now they have a high income tax and a high property tax. But we'll take that to the work session.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I was beginning to believe we'd already begun the work session.
What's that? Okay, so thank you. Is there another question? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, last but not least, I have Dennis Hull. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly did not expect to be last, but listing our office address in Washington, D.C. probably did not help with that. I'm Dennis Hall. I'm State Affairs Manager at Americans for Tax Reform, and on behalf of our President, Grover Norquist, and ATR, I'm pleased to be with you in enthusiastic support of this amendment. I think it's obvious to anyone engaging honestly in this conversation that New Hampshire is crushing it on every metric, at virtually every level, regionally and across the nation. Your citizen government and your commitment to low taxes and liberty, the results are speaking for themselves. Americans for Tax Reform works in all 50 states, and I'm pleased to report that this amendment would be in line with the explosive momentum around the country on lowering and ultimately phasing out income taxes, becoming more like New Hampshire. Governors and legislative leadership in more than a dozen states are taking serious steps and are committed to phasing out their income tax. Already, 5 states are on the path to zero. That's Kentucky, West Virginia, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and as of 7 hours ago, South Carolina, which has not cut taxes in its entire history of the state. They are now on a glide path to 1.99% flat and then all the way to zero. These states are doing what New Hampshire has effectively been doing for decades. They're limiting state spending, and they're putting those surplus dollars into permanent rate reductions that benefit everybody in the state and ultimately drive growth and new investment. Meanwhile, 17 other states cut income taxes just in the last 14 months. Over the next year, we expect Missouri, Georgia, and if all goes well in November, North Carolina to also join the cadre of states that are going to zero. This is a nationwide movement, and people are catching up to New Hampshire. There's a clear contrast between these states, which I believe is the majority of states, and the handful that are moving in the wrong direction, like Massachusetts, of course. Maine's governor just flipped her position last week on supporting a millionaire's tax to compete with the guy with the Nazi tattoo in the Senate primary. Their income tax is already at 7.15%, and they want to bring that top rate up to 9.15%. Of course, they already have a sales tax too, and this comes after every dollar over 20K is already being taxed at 5.8%, which is higher than the national average. And those are poor people who are paying that high tax. Over in Vermont, the legislature is raising property taxes for the second cycle in a row, despite having an 8.9% income tax and a 6.6% state sales tax and very high property taxes to begin with. Meanwhile, New Hampshire has twice the population and spends half of what Vermont does. That's a 4-to-1 difference in terms of per capita state spending, 4-to-1. And still, the results speak for themselves, and New Hampshire's quality of life and quality of services are generally better than your neighbor to the west. So we argue that jobs, families, businesses, wealth, and capital investment are moving to states like New Hampshire and the ones that are phasing out their income tax, and we believe New Hampshire voters should have an opportunity to preserve that privilege for generations to come. And thank you guys very much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my questions, hopefully two. As we talk about the wonderful tax advantages that we have here in the state, it's extremely rare that we include property taxes in that number. I'm curious as to why not.
Property taxes are primarily levied at the local level, and we believe that local spending caps are generally the best way to prevent rising property tax burdens. I will also say people are generally more upset about property taxes because it's the one tax that they see in its entirety at the end of every year. They get a check or a bill right around Christmas and cut a check to the government for whatever the balance might be every year. Nobody has any clue how much in sales taxes they paid, and they generally don't know how much in income taxes they paid either, because they get a refund from the government and they feel good about themselves on tax day for the most part. So property taxes are highly visible, and economists will say it's the most stable and that's why you should keep them around. But really they are levied at the local level, and I think having them be so highly visible is a great way to keep local officials accountable. And I think HB 1300 this year would be a great step in the right direction for New Hampshire. And I'll also add, your property taxes are high, but they're still I believe they're 6th or 7th highest on average around the country. And so they're still not the worst, surprisingly.
Follow up?
Just a comment, we're second to the worst. We heard someone earlier comment that we have a low rate of poverty. We've talked about how we've got solid income levels here. From 2020, did you know that from 2022 to 2023, and from 2023 to 2024, New Hampshire was the state in the country with the highest increase in percent of the homeless population?
I did not know that, but I'm not surprised either, because I think you had a lot of population growth as well. It was a time of high inflation, but of course I think those could have been limited more than they were. So thank you for letting me know.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Almy.
Thank you. I'm a member of the State and Local Taxation Task Force for NCSL, and I can't go to their meetings during our session. So my information is at this point about 4 months old. But at that time, we were told that there were only 2 states that had passed reductions in their state income taxes in order to get down to 0, and that they had both paused what they were doing because they couldn't afford it.
I will tell you that Oklahoma joined just last year. West Virginia was 2023. Mississippi was last year as well, so I think the information may be slightly out of date. No state has paused the trigger.
It was 4 months ago.
What was 4 months ago? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Well, outside of South Carolina, we did have those 4 states on the path to 0 as of last year. There's no way for them to pause it necessarily because it's an automatic glide path. So if revenue doesn't come in above a certain amount, whether it's CPI or inflation plus population, no cut will take effect. But last year, I'll just add that Kentucky missed their trigger just by a hair, and 2/3 of the legislature and the Democrat governor signed into law a bill to give them a 0.5% income tax cut anyway. So even though they didn't make the trigger, they still had a tax cut. And it seems to be a bipartisan issue at this point.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you do have a question.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I don't have a question for this person, but I was hoping that the majority leader might be willing to answer a few technical questions about the bill.
All right, give it to me. Representative Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Leader, for taking my questions. I'll skip the first one I already asked a couple times about a technical concern I have for inserting the amendment under Article 18 of our Constitution. I believe that might be problematic down the road, but let me just point out another technical concern that I have as a lawyer. I'm trained to read language in the bills and to find their meaning under our statutory interpretation tools that we learn in our profession. And I'm a little concerned about the vagueness of the language, particularly found in lines 12 and 26 of the amendment. This specific language is, I quote, "any tax measured in whole or in part," unquote. I'm not really sure what that exactly means. And in particular, the concern is that it might include business taxes for sole proprietors, for instance, and whether or not that is actually going to lead to a loophole for some avenue of tax fraud. So ultimately, I believe that this vagueness in language may be determined in our court system through litigation, and I believe, since I've personally witnessed you on WMUR expressing your skepticism of our courts in past interpretations of matters that pass through this House and this legislature into law, I'm just wondering what makes you trust that the courts will interpret this particular clause with the desired outcome that you desire, or the sponsors desire.
Yeah, so I guess I would say I do trust this committee to amend any language you feel is necessary to make sure that it is clear. And however you would like to see income tax be prohibited in the state of New Hampshire, I'd be happy to support that.
Sounds good. Anything else? Anyone else? Seeing none.
If I may, just one more time,
Sure.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the committee for having this hearing. I know that the folks who expressed, you know, the lack of process and the lack of a hearing on the amendment we voted on before, they didn't bother to show up today, and that makes me sad. But I do appreciate you putting forth the effort today, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else? I have no more pink cards. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on CACR 12, Amendment 1134H. So the last order of business for the committee is just for me to tell you that I am scheduling Monday, April 27th as a meeting day. So Monday, April 27th, and guess what will be on the agenda? CACR 12, Amendment 1134H. We'll have a work session starting at 10 and an executive session starting at 10:30. Of course, you'll see that when the calendar comes out. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for coming.